Chapter 17:14. A six-armed ape that was in charge of guarding suddenly woke up. Under Long Gang's gaze, the six-armed ape's eyes gradually became confused. Its pupils were suddenly covered with a circle of light green light. Suddenly, the six-armed ape directly activated the gun-like weapon in its hand. A few beams of light instantly shot out, and the rest of the apes guarding on the iron mesh above the dungeon were instantly shot in the head at the speed of light. They died in their sleep without even a trace of pain. After that, the six-armed ape even took out a key and opened the iron mesh of the dungeon. Everyone was able to escape and crawled out. At this time, Long Gang came in front of the six-armed ape and sat down, continuing to look into its eyes. A thin layer of sweat gradually seeped out from Long Gang's forehead. This was probably the special ability that Master Karen mentioned that Long Gang had. ############################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################################### 83rds. At this time, when the few soldiers under Madame Kaya looked at Long Gang, they could not help but feel a little more afraid. However, Madame Kaya said in a low voice, Long Gang's mind control has no effect on the residents of Underwater City. We are immune to his mind control. Although they wanted to ask why Madame Kaya knew, at this time, they were more relieved. This kind of special ability, as long as it did not affect the people of Underwater City, was obviously not harmful. As for the ability to control the fish in the deep sea, how many fish could there be in an area? Even if all of them were gathered, it would not be enough to kill them all with the magic energy cannons of Underwater City's fleet. After a while, Long Gang came back slightly tired. Basically, I understand the situation here. Long Gang wiped the sweat off his forehead and looked at the people who came forward at this time and said, Master Karen's guess was right. In addition to the Kingdom of Boulders, there is also a Forest Kingdom. The Kingdom of Boulders has 6-armed apes, while the Forest Kingdom has some kind of mutated monkey with 2 tails. The relationship between the two sides is hostile. How to leave? Master Karen hurriedly asked. Long Gang shook his head and said, I don't know. This 6-armed ape does not know how to leave the Kingdom of Boulders. It has been here since birth and has never left. However, according to what this 6-armed ape knew, this Boulder Kingdom occupied a very small area. Apart from the Forest Kingdom, this place was surrounded by a large number of terrifying beasts. Other than fighting each other, what these two kingdoms do most of the time is to fend off the exotic beasts around them. That won't make much of a difference to our current situation. Madame Kaya shook her head. Long Gang gave him a comforting expression. This 6-armed ape is just a soldier at the lowest level. The things it knows are definitely limited. That General Bachelou you speak of, since he has a tool to communicate with you, he obviously knows more. Are you planning to look for General Bachelou? Master Karen was startled. Long Gang nodded and said, According to this guy, General Bachelou's favorite thing to do is to enjoy female apes. This general's goal is to give birth to 1,000 offspring, so other than fighting, eating, and giving birth is basically used in this aspect. If we go find him now, it should be the best opportunity. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. They were indeed stunned by General Bachelou's great goal. Then how many offspring has he given birth to now? A soldier of Underwater City couldn't help but ask subconsciously. In Underwater City, he hadn't married yet. He didn't even have a girlfriend, so he had always been curious about this aspect. I didn't ask in detail. Is it important? Long Gang looked at this relatively young guy in surprise and then said, Right, this brother, you look very unfamiliar. When did you join Destiny? Why haven't I seen you before? He just joined recently, Master Karen said without batting an eyelid, after you were caught. We lost a lot of people in the last operation, so we replenished some. Because they are new to us, they are relatively unfamiliar, so we specially let them join this operation to rescue you. I see. Long Gang nodded, then bowed deeply in front of the soldiers of Underwater City and said sincerely, I will never forget the kindness of saving my life. Brothers, for me, you put you in such danger. Don't worry, even if I have to risk my life, I will definitely bring you out of here. You're welcome. The soldiers of Underwater City couldn't help but be startled by this criminal's attitude. Wasn't it said that the Dragon Ridge of the Destiny organization was incomparably ferocious, violent, and perverse? From the looks of it, they were the righteous type. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. What's important right now is to understand the situation here as soon as possible. Madame Kaya waved her hand at this moment. Take off the equipment on these six-armed apes. Since we're going deep in here, we can't be unarmed. Kaya, come here. I have a few things to say to you. Longang suddenly waved his hand at Madame Kaya at this moment. Master Karen's face could not help but change slightly, while Madame Kaya walked over emotionlessly. She arrived at a corner with Longang very soon. What is it? Madame Kaya asked without batting an eyelid. It's been hard on you, Kaya. Longang sighed at this moment. Originally, I didn't want you to get involved in this matter. I never thought that you would actually infiltrate the operation this time to save me. I'm afraid that your identity has been exposed, so you can no longer continue to stay in the army of Underwater City. Madame Kaya shook her head. I was very careful this time. They might not have discovered me. Longang pressed his hands on Madame Kaya's shoulders. No, you've definitely been discovered. I've clashed with Lyoga this time. I've discovered that we've always underestimated her. No wonder she was once the most outstanding princess of the Sea Demon Royal Court. I'm afraid that her monitoring of destiny is far beyond our imagination. The Silvermoon, which was the princess of the Siren Court? This matter did not exist in Madame Kaya's memories. However, as a spy, Madame Kaya had immediately told her not to alarm her at all. However, was it within Master Karen's expectations that Longang would talk to her about this? However, why did Longang avoid Master Karen and tell her about this? Did Master Karen not know about Lyoga's identity? What do you think? Madame Kaya could only ask softly. Longang thought about it and said, the kingdom's government isn't something destiny can oppose right now. Our idea of destroying the kingdom's government from the inside won't work in the end. If possible, I hope that you can accompany me back to the Sea Demon Imperial Court. This time, Louis XXXIX actually proposed to use me as an exchange. Although I don't know what he wants to exchange for, I'm afraid that he already discovered our identities. Madame Kaya remained silent. Longang said seriously, it doesn't matter if my identity is exposed, but the kingdom's government probably hasn't discovered your true identity yet. No one will think that you're the same as me. We're both royalty of the Siren Court. As for Riaz, he's your child. He also has the bloodline of the Siren Court. He should return to the Siren Court and obtain what he deserves. Let's talk about this after we're out of danger. Madame Kaya sucked in a deep breath and said slowly. However, she could not help but feel her heart churn. Could it be that Longang was mentally influencing her? She could not be certain, but at the same time, her loyalty to the Underwater City was extremely clear. How was she Longang's relative? How was she born in the Siren Court with him, and even royalty? She had complete memories. She was born in an orphanage in the Underwater City. Her parents had died in the war against the Sirens, so she had always been raised by the kingdom's government. When she grew up, she was determined to become a soldier. Many years ago, she had been sent by the government to infiltrate Destiny as a spy. That's true. It's indeed better to talk about this after we're out of danger. Longang nodded, but don't worry. Originally, I was planning on sending your family back to the Siren Court after saving Josher. I've already contacted them, and Father has agreed to my request. He's also willing to meet Riaz. Madame Kaya felt like she was unable to continue the conversation with Longang. However, her subordinates had already collected all the equipment, which created an opportunity for her. She lowered her voice and said, Now's not the time to talk about this. Long Gang nodded, but in the end, he said, Kaya, this might be the place mentioned in the ancient legends of the royal court. We might be able to discover something here. If I can really discover something, then after I return to the Sea Demon Royal Court, it might be able to increase my capital for taking over the royal court. However, remember, you have to prioritize your own safety. If there's anything, come to my side as soon as possible. Madame Kaya nodded her head. The place mentioned in the legends. Where was it? Madame Kaya only felt a stabbing pain in her head. It was rather uncomfortable, but her complexion remained the same. However, her memories seemed to have been split into two. One was clear, and she could recall every single detail. It was her memories of growing up in the underwater city. The other seemed to be shrouded in a thick layer of fog. She could not see it clearly at all. Very soon, everyone changed into the equipment they had looted from the six-armed ape. Under the lead of the six-armed ape controlled by Long Gang, they successfully left the dungeon. They were not far away from where the six-armed ape General Bachelou resided. The dungeon had originally been the general's residence. This place seems like some sort of facility. Master Karen studied the layout of the path. How do these wild beasts possess such technology? Long Gang said, they didn't construct this place. There are many similar places on this strange continent. They just occupied this place and treated it as their own territory. It wasn't created by these wild beasts? Master Karen was surprised. In that case, shouldn't there be intelligent creatures here, and they should be extremely civilized? No, Long Gang shook his head. At the very least, this guy doesn't seem to know of any. There are so few guards here, a warrior of the underwater city said with a frown. Long Gang turned around and said, General Bachelou's way of thinking is rather realistic. He feels like the more subordinates he has, the more powerful he will be. That's why, apart from wanting to have 1,000 offspring, he also ordered the male apes in his territory to have more offspring. So basically, when there's nothing to do, they'll mate here. That's comparable to the Siren tribe, the warrior could not help but say. Wild beasts are wild beasts after all. Long Gang said indifferently, the Siren tribe's reproduction is only for the sake of better survival. You live in the underwater city, and have the protection of the city. Naturally, you have no way of knowing how much danger the Siren tribe has to face in order to survive in the deep sea. The warrior was about to refute, but Madame Kaya secretly glared at him. Only then did he lower his head. All right, let's not talk about this anymore. Long Gang shook his head. We've arrived at General Bachelou's room. At the same time, an unpleasant sound was heard. Long Gang ordered the six-armed ape under his control to go in first. Then, he went in himself and ordered everyone to stay where they were. 3 minutes later, Long Gang dragged General Bachelou, who was much bigger than the average six-armed ape, out of the cave. Of the general's 6 arms, 5 of them had already been broken, and the remaining one was being held by Long Gang. He threw the general to the ground. Let's ask him directly. This guy has a collar that can communicate with us. With that, Long Gang sat cross-legged on the ground and closed his eyes, as if he was resting. At this moment, General Bachelou's face was filled with unconcealable fear. No one knew what it had experienced, but the general clamped its legs tightly together, as if it was about to die. All right, if you don't want to die, you have to answer honestly no matter what we ask you from now on, Master Karen said with a deep voice. Do you understand? Herdsman. Herdsman. Unexpectedly, General Bachelou pointed at Long Gang in horror, the fear on its face overshadowing the pain. It said with a trembling voice, You're the herdsman. Herdsman. Herdsman? What do you mean? Master Karen looked at Long Gang in confusion. Long Gang shook his head. I don't know, it kept calling me that. Herdsman, what is that? Perhaps it was because of the fear. General Bachelou started to tremble. You're back. You're back. Our ancestors said that you've left, and will not enslave us anymore. You? No. You can't come back. With that, General Bachelou, who only had one arm left, suddenly jumped up. However, Madame Kaya quickly fired a shot, directly piercing through its knee. The ape general instantly howled in grief. However, it still screamed, "Go! Go! This place belongs to us. Go!" ######PS 4383 End of chapter. Chapter 1715. General Bachelou of the megalithic kingdom had really worked hard. Look, 5 of its 6 arms were crippled, and the remaining arm was not equipped with a weapon. Even though its lower body was severely injured, it still resisted with all its might, shouting and pouncing towards Long Gang in grief and indignation. He really had worked very hard. Without another word, Madame Kaya broke its other leg as well. I like warriors who don't fear death. Lady Kaya walked up to General Bachelou, who was like a pile of mud, and pressed the barrel of the gun she had taken against his forehead. "Killing you is easy." However, the general's courage seemed to have been used up. He shuddered. Don't kill me. I am willing to be your slave." Everyone looked at each other. Long Gang clearly did not expect the ape general to submit so easily. He could not help but ask in surprise, "You're really going to submit?" General Bachelou's face was still filled with fear. He nodded and said in a low voice, "Herdsman. You're a herdsman." The ape general seemed to have an instinctive fear of being a herdsman. Perhaps what he submitted to was not their strength, but his identity as a herdsman. Master Karen frowned. Just as he was about to say something, Long Gang suddenly said, "Bachelou, since you're willing to submit, then from now on, you need to listen to everyone's orders. Do you understand?" "I understand." Although General Bachelou was weak, he still struggled to get up and knelt in front of everyone. "Respected herdsman, Bachelou submits to you." "All right, we need some food now," Long Gang said indifferently. "Also, I need you to tell me about the megalithic kingdom and the forest kingdom. No matter how much you know, you have to tell me everything." General Bachelou nodded and then suddenly let out a sharp whistling sound. After a while, more than 10 six-armed apes were running over with weapons in their hands. The soldiers of the underwater city frowned and were about to counterattack, but Long Gang waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be nervous. After the ape warriors arrived, they didn't attack. They just lifted General Bachelou up. "Please come with me, master. There shouldn't be a problem," Long Gang said calmly. Everyone could only follow for the time being. Soon, under the guidance of General Bachelou, everyone arrived at a place that looked like a dining hall. In particular, the soldiers of Undersea City felt a sense of familiarity with this place. It was very similar to the canteen in their barrack. However, Bachelou claimed that this was the place where it usually ate. After a while, 6-armed apes walked in with plates full of food. The food almost filled up the 6 tables. "Let's eat." Long Gang looked at everyone. In fact, they were starving for a long time. Now that they got the nod of approval, they instantly let go of the food. At this time, Long Gang was invited by Bachelou to sit on a particularly large chair. At this time, this ape general did not care about its own injury, and rather humbly served. However, the wound on its knee had stopped bleeding, and the wound had even grown granulation. Its recovery ability was quite amazing. "How was the Boulder Kingdom born?" Long Gang suddenly asked. Madame Kaya and Master Karen both subconsciously stopped what they were doing and silently paid attention to the conversation. After the herdsman left, General Bachelou had a cautious expression. "Our ancestors, as well as the ancestors of the monkeys in the Forest Kingdom, escaped from their cages. I heard from my great-great-great-grandfather that our ancestors had fled very far before coming to this place. After a long time, our ancestors did not see the shepherd again, so they began to expand their range of activity. Later on, our ancestors began to reproduce and finally established the Boulder Kingdom. The Forest Kingdom was similar to us." "Where did you escape from?" Long Gang thought for a moment and asked. General Bachelou quickly said, In the direction where the sun rises, there is a huge tower that leads to the sky. Our ancestors escaped from there. Long Gang subconsciously glanced at Madame Kaya and Master Karen. Master Karen thought for a moment and said, "On the way here when we were captured, we did see a huge metal tower, but it was very far away." "You never went back to that huge tower?" Long Gang continued to ask. Bachelor shook his head. "Our ancestors forbade us from approaching that place. That was where the shepherd used to live. Even though the shepherd was no longer around, there were still his servants. Our ancestors said that they have great power and that angering them would bring an unprecedented disaster to the Boulder Kingdom." "How do you know he was the shepherd?" At this moment, Madame Kaya suddenly asked. "Logically speaking, you weren't even born when the shepherd disappeared. Since you've never seen him, how do you know this?" General Bachelot said with a trembling voice, "I can't beat him. Only the shepherd can beat me." Immediately, the soldiers of the underwater city sneered. Which one of them was not a powerful warrior? However, General Bachelot shook his head. "Even if you can beat me, you're not the shepherd. I can tell. The souls of our ancestors will whisper in my ears and give me guidance." Such a heartfelt answer made the excited soldiers of the underwater city unable to refute. They could only helplessly continue eating. "How long does it take to get to the huge tower from here?" Master Karen asked after some thought. He had a feeling that the truth could be found in the huge tower. "It's very far," General Bachelot shook his head. "We can't walk there. There are many fierce beasts on the way. I've seen fierce beasts the size of mountains before. Just one stomp could kill dozens of us. Unless what?" This time it was Long Gang. With a glare, General Bachelot began to tremble again. He could only say hesitantly, "Unless we use the steel beast our ancestors rode when they escaped. It can travel underground and has a very safe path that leads to the bottom of the tower." "Then it's easy." Master Karen could not help but smile. However, General Bachelot said, "That's not easy. The steel beast is under the king's watch. The king definitely won't let us get close to it." "Can't the shepherd be there as well?" Master Karen looked at Long Gang and asked. General Bachelot immediately fell into a dilemma. He wanted to nod, but he could not shake his head either. He could only stare blankly. "How long does it take to get to your king's place from here?" Long Gang asked. General Bachelot could only helplessly say, "Very soon. Half a day is enough." "Then let's set off later." Long Gang nodded. "You, take us to see the king of the Boulder Kingdom. It's decided then." General Bachelot had no choice but to nod his head unwillingly. After that, he had become silent, and no one knew what he was thinking. After dinner, Long Gang's group immediately set off. But to their surprise, they did not set off on foot this time. General Bachelot actually pulled out a vehicle that looked like a flying tumbler from the warehouse. These apes clearly did not have the knowledge and technology to create such a tool. But over a long period of time, through trial and error, they had also figured out how to use it. "This is my mount." General Bachelot skillfully climbed onto this chariot-like thing and said proudly, "I once rode it and defeated the big beast on the other side of the mountain." But Long Gang's group did not care about General Bachelot's boasting. A few of the underwater city's warriors kept touching here and there. They even found that there were some parts of the war chariot that they were familiar with. "What's the matter? This thing seems to have some similarities with our flying tumbler in the underwater city. I always feel that if I have some time I can start this thing. But what is the energy source of this thing? The text on the control interface is really strange. I always feel that it is very similar to our text, but I can't recognize any of it." With that, he curiously pressed a button in the cockpit. In an instant, General Bachelot's face changed. He was about to say something to stop him, but it was too late. The chariot suddenly shook, and then the middle door of the chariot opened. Then, a beam of light instantly shot out. Where the beam passed, the trees and the earth were instantly vaporized. Only a scorched mark was left. Everyone was secretly speechless. The power of this giant cannon was even comparable to the heavy magic cannons of the regular army of the underwater city. "Please don't touch my mount." General Bachelu was suddenly furious. Even though Long Gang had ordered him to treat everyone with the same respect, General Bachelu would only submit in front of Long Gang. The so-called whispers of the ancestors could not be heard by anyone, and no one knew if they were real or fake. "Are there many of these chariots here?" Master Karen suddenly asked. Madame Kaya immediately narrowed her eyes at Master Karen. She could probably tell that he was unwilling to give up. Destiny didn't have many people, and they obviously didn't need much equipment. But if they could obtain the weapons here, how is that possible? General Bachelu shook his head. "This was given to me by the king. In the entire kingdom, only I have it." Master Karen shook his head in disappointment, and then stopped talking. Soon, everyone boarded the chariot and headed towards the territory of the Boulder Kingdom's king. "Warning, warning, please leave this train immediately. Warning, warning." The young girl Yoga expressionlessly looked at the mail projection in front of her. She didn't even have the interest to remember the name of this projection. "I said, start this train immediately. Warning, warning. Please leave this train immediately. Otherwise, according to the protection regulations, I will use eviction mode," the projection said again. Humph! The young girl's patience had clearly worn out. She coldly snorted, and her body directly passed through the projection, and then violently tore open the door of the cockpit. This kind of violent behavior was clearly beyond the tolerance of this train. In an instant, the doors of the train began to fall down, and at the same time, cannon barrels began to emerge from the ceiling of the train. The young girl didn't care about this. While the intelligent projection was still nagging, she directly inserted her hand into the control panel and pulled out several wires. The projection of the man distorted, and then it didn't appear again. Naturally, the cannons in the carriage that hadn't been activated yet also stopped. The young girl frowned and sat in the cockpit, muttering, "Lewis said that this thing can be manually operated. How did I do it? If I had known, I wouldn't have been distracted when I was listening to his story." The young girl began to randomly pull out the wires in the cockpit, and then randomly connect them again. Most importantly, there seemed to be a problem with the connection of an important wire. An extreme sense of danger suddenly surged into her heart. Without saying anything, the young girl broke open the deck of the train and quickly jumped out. At the same time, the train instantly exploded. The huge airflow even directly blew her body out. Lyoga got up from the ground, her head full of buzzing sounds, and her expression ugly. She gritted her teeth and rushed into the tracks of the train without looking back. With a push of her legs, her body shot out like a bullet. Sure enough, her legs were the most reliable. But at this moment, a dense swarm of mechanical beetles the size of a human head appeared in the tunnel. These mechanical beetles could shoot out beams of light when they opened their mouths, and the power of their attacks was quite high. The young girl's face darkened as she watched these mechanical beetles madly attacking her. She gritted her teeth and said, "Is there an end to this?" It seemed that even if they were to use the most reliable method of walking, this journey wouldn't be too peaceful. The deck of the seats suddenly opened up, and then food began to be transported out. It didn't appear to be any delicacies, but a kind of liquid. According to Tsang Xing, these were nutrition pastes made on the spot, and there were also flavors to choose from. In addition, some drinks could also be brewed. As for the other food, they were temporarily inedible due to having gone bad. However, Riaz clearly didn't insist on this. To be able to sit on a comfortable chair while hurrying on the journey, and to be provided with food in this unfamiliar place, he couldn't ask for more, right? "Excuse me, do you need a massage service?" Tsang Xing asked with a smile. Just like its identity as a train attendant. At the same time, a list of massage services was directly displayed in front of Riaz. He subconsciously glanced at it. Shoulder massage, leg massage, waist massage, asterisk 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 asterisk. Riaz couldn't help but blink, asterisk 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 asterisk. How do I massage that place? Riaz subconsciously turned around to look at Brother Luo in the back seat. At this moment, Brother Luo was fiddling with a screen on the seat with interest. As for his big sister, from who knows where, she took out something similar to a screwdriver and began to dismantle the screen on the seat armrest. The service of this train is quite good. I wonder what it's made of. It's really interesting. So scary. Riaz shuddered and quickly sat down obediently. At this moment, a fragrant smell assaulted his nose. Riaz was startled as Helen leaned on his shoulder. She was too tired and had fallen asleep. Riaz didn't dare to move even more. Massage, or whatever, it's better not to. Hashtag 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 PS. As usual. Chapter 1716. Miss Maid didn't disassemble the train in the end. Note, she didn't disassemble it completely. After all, the train was so long that it was impossible to disassemble the parts one by one in a short time. I see. It's the first time I've seen this kind of compression technology. Hearing his big sister's muttering, Riaz felt relieved. His big sister was indeed thinking the same as him. She was just interested in studying the technology of this train. Unknowingly, the speed of the train had slowed down. At this time, Songxing, who had disappeared when Miss Maid started to twist the screwdriver, appeared again. Dear passengers, we have arrived at the Central Tower. Thank you for choosing this train. I'm Songxing, the attendant. I look forward to serving you next time. I feel at home. Riaz thought to himself. Have we arrived? The little siren rubbed her glasses and looked sleepy. It's so fast. It was indeed fast. A few thousand seconds was only a little more than an hour. It was easy to pass through if one took a nap. Songxing opened the door of the train and saw the passengers off respectfully. The Central Tower station was the terminal station of all trains. At this time, on the platform, one could see the interconnected tracks radiating in all directions. Some of the same trains were parked on some tracks. Riaz counted. Except for the one he took, there were 37 other trains on the platform, but the number of tracks was far more than that. It was so big, but the platform was dead silent at this time. Except for the sound of their footsteps, there was no sound at all. The stairs were covered with a thick layer of dust. Obviously, no one had walked on this place for a long time. According to Songxing, Louis XXXIX was a herdsman who came here before him. Riaz wondered how long ago His Majesty came to this place. With doubts in his heart, Riaz walked to the nearest lift gate. There was still light scanning his body, and then the gate opened automatically. The lift platform rose slowly. But Riaz still had no clue about the purpose of His Majesty letting him enter this place. Suddenly, the lift came to a stop. As the door opened, Miss Maid walked in front of the crowd. With a wave of his hand, a grayish-black wall of light appeared in front of everyone, blocking their path. The moment the door opened, more than 10 beams of light shot in at the same time. However, the beams of light directly hit the grayish-black wall of light and then disappeared without a trace. What's going on? Riaz looked ahead in horror. Outside the gate, there were 10 mechs as tall as a human. The attacks were clearly coming from the cannons on the arms of these mechs. Facing the sudden attack, Riaz couldn't react in time, but he still pulled Helen into his arms and hid by the side of the door. It seems that the Central Tower doesn't welcome you, Riaz, Miss Maid said with a casual smile. But there are some who are welcome, aren't there? Songxing's service is very good. Riaz tried to make fun of the situation and said, well, when I first started school, I was indeed not very popular. Other than those who spent a lot of money, not many people liked to be friends with me. Maybe it's because I'm shy? Miss Maid smiled and turned to look at Boss Luo. Luocho said casually, do as you see fit. Try not to destroy this place. Miss Maid nodded and walked out of the elevator platform. Riaz was still holding Helen by the side of the door, and said worriedly, "Brother Luo, how can you let big sister go out alone? She alone is enough." Boss Luo smiled and said, "If you need me to do something, things may be more troublesome than expected." "What are you talking about?" Riaz opened his mouth and was about to say something, but Miss Maid had already walked back again, and dragged back a mech as tall as a human. Riaz was shocked and stuck his head out. He saw that on the corridor outside, those mechs had been dismantled into piles of parts and scattered on the ground. He couldn't help but say in amazement, "This is much more violent than that violent woman Lyoga." "Riaz, what did you say just now?" Miss Maid looked at Riaz coldly and narrowed her eyes with a smile. No, I didn't say anything. Really?" He hurriedly covered his mouth. Miss Maid didn't pursue the matter. She just looked at Boss Luo and said, "These mechs probably don't have the ability to communicate. They should only be acting under orders." While speaking, Miss Maid gently twisted her hands and twisted off the head of the mech. Then she opened the armor of the head, only to see some sophisticated parts and circuits inside. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, "Since they are receiving orders, there must be someone who gives orders. It seems that this central tower doesn't seem to welcome intruders." But Songxing didn't reject Riaz's entry. Miss Maid continued. Luo Chio's eyes turned at this time. He bent down and pulled out a palm-sized piece of metal from the gap in the chest armor of the mech. He took a look at it. "It seems that someone left us a gift early." "What's this?" Riaz looked over curiously. Luochio handed the metal piece to Riaz. "It's a message. I think it's for you." "Left for me?" Riaz was stunned. He looked down at the metal piece and found words engraved on it. "This is the language of the underwater city? Please find the room with the Omega symbol. I left you a hint." "Maybe it's not for you," Boss Luo suddenly said. "I'm afraid it's for someone who will find this message." Riaz opened his mouth and said subconsciously, "You mean, this metal piece was left by His Majesty for the person who came in later?" "Probably." Luochio smiled and said, "He obviously didn't know who would come here after him. But since you're here, it's naturally you." But how can His Majesty be sure that I can be sure that the person who came later can find this message?" Riaz shook his head and said, "This thing was hidden in the mech's body, and was discovered by the person who came later?" "Not only that." Luochio shook his head and said, "If I'm not wrong, there should be something similar in the mech's body." Riaz was still doubtful. He quickly walked out of the corridor and searched among the wreckage of the mech. Seeing this, Helen also stepped forward to help. After a while, Riaz came back with 9 identical metal pieces, including the original one. There were exactly 10 pieces, corresponding to the number of mech's body. The content on the metal pieces was exactly the same. Riaz had to admit that Brother Luo was right. "I don't understand." Riaz held the pile of metal pieces and shook his head. "Why did His Majesty hide these metal pieces in the mech's body? If the person who came later can't destroy these mech's body, then there will never be a way to find the message he left behind." Luochio thought for a while and said, "Probably, there's no way to leave the message anywhere other than these mech's body. Or, as long as the message is left on these mech's body, then the person who came later will definitely be able to find it." "You mean, these mech's body will definitely attack the person who came later?" Riaz couldn't help but be surprised. Not to mention why these mech's body would attack the person who came later. But what if the person who came later can't defeat these mech's body and is killed? Then wouldn't this message be meaningless? "Who knows?" Miss Maid said indifferently. "Maybe your emperor thinks that if you can't even deal with these things, then you're not qualified to get the message he left behind. It doesn't matter if you die." Riaz smiled bitterly. "So, I'm probably not qualified. If it weren't for Big Sister, Helen and I would have died before we walked out of the gate." "Luck is also a kind of strength." Miss Maid chuckled. "Since your emperor set up such a test, he naturally wouldn't care what method the person who came later used to get the message he left behind." Riaz shook his head and didn't agree with Big Sister's words. This time, it could be said that he was lucky, but his luck wouldn't always be good. He took a deep breath and then began to fiddle with the mech's body wreckage on the ground. He picked up some parts that could be used as weapons and held them in his hand. At the same time, he threw a shotgun that looked like Fire Kirin to Helen. It didn't need to be activated with magic power. It could launch an attack by pressing the button directly. There was also a measuring panel similar to the energy scale on the gun body. These should be energy boxes. I just don't know what kind of energy technology it is. Riaz also took out a lot of energy boxes from other weapons and stuffed them into the pockets of his clothes and pants. Boss Luo also got one. He held it in his hand, but he didn't intend to use it. Since you've got the message left by the Underwater City Emperor, what are you going to do next? Boss Luo suddenly asked. Riaz pondered and said, since His Majesty left a message, then I can only look for the room mentioned in the message. There may be more clues there. But this place is so big, how are you going to find it? Boss Luo asked again. Riaz couldn't help but think hard. Suddenly, he looked at the mech's body wreckage all over the ground and said, Brother Luo, hypothetically, I'm just saying hypothetically. Assuming His Majesty is really like what you said and deliberately left the metal pieces on these mechs, and these mechs will definitely take the initiative to attack latecomers, how many of these metal pieces do you think His Majesty will hide? A lot. Boss Luo smiled. Riaz's eyes brightened and said, That's right. A lot. Not just a lot, it should be all of them. Only when all the mechs have this kind of thing, it can ensure that latecomers will have the greatest chance to find the message left behind no matter which one they touch or destroy. What are you trying to say? Boss Luo looked at Riaz with interest. Let's assume that these mechs will be scattered around here, then it's obviously too troublesome to put the message on every mech, Riaz quickly said. There must be a place where these mechs will gather. Then as long as we guard there, we can guarantee that the message will be placed on every mech. It could be the place where these mechs were made, or it could be the place where these mechs are replenished. His Majesty said that he left a hint to that room, then I have reason to believe that the hint is hidden in the place where these mechs gather. Brother Luo, what do you think? Now you're the captain. Boss Luo gave such an answer as if he was encouraging him. We're your team members, you decide what to do next. Do you really think this is an adventure? Riaz couldn't help but cry out, I'm not kidding. I can't be the captain, Brother Luo, stop teasing me. You think I'm teasing you? Luochio looked into his eyes and asked. Riaz moved his lips, averted his gaze and subconsciously said, compared to a rash person like me, isn't Brother Luo more suitable? Look, you are always so calm and Big Sister is so powerful. I see. Boss Luo thought for a while and suddenly said, then if we're not here, you won't have these worries, right? Not here, how? He suddenly looked up, and Brother Luo had disappeared from his sight. Shocked, Riaz couldn't help but look around. Not only had Brother Luo disappeared, but even Miss Maid had also disappeared at this time. Helen, did you see where Brother Luo and the others went? Riaz looked at Helen in a panic. The siren girl looked at him with a puzzled gaze and asked curiously, Riaz, what are you talking about? What Brother Luo, other than you and me, there's no one else here. Impossible. Riaz grabbed Helen's shoulders agitatedly. How can there be no one? Didn't we meet Brother Luo and Big Sister at the beach, and then we walked all the way here? Look at these mechas, Big Sister dismantled them. Riaz, you're hurting me. Helen said with grievance. Did you really forget? Riaz's voice trembled slightly. Helen rubbed the place where she was hurt and said with grievance, wasn't it just you and me on the way here? These terrible things, you're the one who broke them. Riaz, did you hit your head in the battle just now? Don't remember. No, it's not that I don't remember, it's that I somehow lost that memory. Riaz thought in horror. Riaz? Seeing Riaz leaning against the wall absent-mindedly, Helen had to walk up and call him softly. Riaz took a deep breath and exhaled before saying with a bitter smile, "No matter what, I can only be the captain." So, the young man from the undersea city and the young woman from the siren were close to each other. They slowly walked out of the promenade and entered the mysterious central tower. As soon as they left, two figures slowly appeared in the corridor. Boss Lua looked at Miss Maid and suddenly said, "Do you know what request Louis made in the end?" "What is it?" Luaccio looked at the end of the corridor and said softly, "An heir. Hashtag 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 PS. 4483. Chapter 1717. Nothing was said. The only thing that could be heard in the cabin of the chariot was the sound of the chariot moving. Ever since Long Gang had awakened, his mind had gradually become stronger. The underwater city had targeted Long Gang many times, and he had almost been heavily injured every time. However, he had been able to recover very quickly because of his powerful physique. After learning that Long Gang's true identity was actually a member of the royal family of the Sea Demon Court, his powerful physique seemed to have been explained. However, this only made the Madame Kai feel the severity of the situation. According to the information the city possessed, Long Gang had been rescued as a mixed-blood child who had been enslaved by the city. But now, it seemed that when Long Gang was still a child, the Sea Demon Royal Court had already planned to send him to the underwater city as a spy. Long Gang, as a spy, even became an important figure in the Destiny organization. As for herself, she had traveled with Long Gang. She was even a member of the royal family of the Sea Demon Court. The Madame Kai vaguely thought of a terrifying possibility. The kingdom might have secretly tampered with her memories. Or perhaps, Long Gang had used some method on her without her knowledge, causing a trace of confusion in her clear memories. When she contacted Master Karen to tell her not to tell anyone that she was a member of the underwater city, the Madame Kai leaned towards the latter. She had already been set up by Master Karen. However, if the truth was that her memories had been tampered with by the kingdom, Kaya? What is it? Long Gang extended his hand and gently patted the back of the Madame Kaya's hand. "It's nothing. You were lost in your thoughts, so I was a little worried." His concerned gaze was so sincere that the Madame Kaya found it difficult to get used to it. However, she did not panic. She only shook her head gently. "It's nothing. I'm just worried about Riaz. He's been drawn into this place just like us." "Don't worry, he's your child." Long Gang comforted her. "Since he has the bloodline, he'll definitely be able to unleash his potential when danger comes. Between life and death, he'll be able to hear the call from the depths of his bloodline." "I hope so," the Madame Kaya said gloomily. At this moment, the chariot suddenly stopped, and the inertia caused everyone to lean forward. Master Karen hurriedly asked, "General Bachelou, what happened?" The ape general turned around and said with a solemn expression, "We've arrived at the king's territory." They immediately looked out of the cockpit's viewfinder and saw that around the chariot, a group of 6 armed apes armed to the teeth had surrounded it. "This is the king's personal guard. Every one of them is only slightly weaker than me," General Bachelou said solemnly. "Master Shepherd, from now on, you have to be careful." With that, General Bachelou opened the door of the cockpit and climbed out of the chariot. "I'm General Bachelou. I'm here to fight the king." "Ha ha ha, Bachelou, you're challenging king again. You really won't give up?" The voice came faintly from outside. The people in the cockpit had quietly observed that the guards of the king of Boulder Kingdom were all wearing the same metal collar. "This time, I will defeat it and become the new king of the Boulder Kingdom. All of you will submit to me. Especially you, Mangrove. I'll definitely make you give birth to my child." "Go to hell, Bachelot." With a loud sound, the deck of the chariot shook. At this moment, another guard's loud voice rang out, "All right, go in, General Bachelot. The king accepts your challenge, but he wants to have a fair fight with you after the meal. Treat it as a meal to aid digestion." They were still talking, but the chariot had indeed slowly entered the king's territory. Furthermore, Bachelor quickly walked out of the war chariot and asked everyone to stay in the cockpit and not make a sound to avoid being discovered. Long Gang stared at Bachelor for a long time before nodding and agreeing to this arrangement. Take the time to rest. There might be a tough battle to fight later, Long Gang said and closed his eyes. At this moment, Master Karen suddenly shifted her body and stuffed a note into Madame Kaiya's hand. She looked down and saw the words written on it. What were you and Long Gang talking about? Madame Kaiya glanced at Master Karen indifferently before crumpling the note into a ball and wrapping it around herself. She leaned to the side and closed her eyes. Master Karen shook her head and could only focus all her attention on monitoring the movements outside. Although Bachelor had left, there were still 3 guards outside watching over the chariot. At this moment, Kong Hai suddenly moved. Plug-in loading complete. At this moment, a tentacle that looked like a wire silently extended from the back of Kong Hai's neck. The tentacle was slowly crawling towards the base of the control panel in the chariot's cockpit. Connection successful. Searching for internal network signal, he closed his eyes again. Master Kai Luan looked at Kong Hai thoughtfully. This guy had always been very cold, and Master Kai Luan thought he was already used to it. But now, for some reason, he suddenly felt that Kong Hai seemed to be even colder. He was icy cold, as if he was no longer human. However, at this moment, there was an abnormal movement outside the chariot. Long Gang immediately opened his eyes and met Master Karen's ugly expression. Long Gang, it looks like Bachelor didn't submit to you at all. We've been betrayed. He saw that the outside of the chariot was already surrounded by rings of ape warriors. Not only that, these ape warriors even brought chariots of the same model as General Bachelor's. There were 5 of them. They were like 5 giant beasts, completely encircling everyone. No, I can sense that it's not lying. Long Gang shook his head. Perhaps we've underestimated this Boulder Kingdom. What do we do now? Fight? That seemed to be the only choice. However, in the next moment, a voice came from outside. It was one of the ape warriors wearing a metal collar. Listen up, from now on, give up resisting and come out. The great king of the Boulder Kingdom wants to see you. I repeat, don't resist, we have the firepower to destroy you in an instant. Then let's go out. Long Gang looked at everyone's eyes and said lightly. This was not their plan to sneak into the king's territory. Their original plan was that Baturu would temporarily delay the king of the Kingdom of Boulders, and then they would sneak into the place where the steel behemoth that the ape ancestors rode was placed. If Bachelor did not betray them, then there must be something special on his side. At this time, everyone slowly walked out of the chariot under the guidance of a large number of weapons. Soon, the ape warriors came up and collected their weapons. The king wants to see them. Take them all away. Long Gang and the others saw General Bachelor in a ring-shaped arena made of stones. In addition to General Bachelor, there was another 6-armed ape in the arena at this time. It was not even as tall as Bachelor. Even among the general 6-armed apes, it could only be said to be ordinary or even thin. However, in the eyes of Long Gang and the others, the king of the Boulder Kingdom was more like a human. At this time, General Bachelor was panting heavily in the arena, staring at the Boulder King with a solemn expression. If one looked carefully, one could even see that there were more than 10 bleeding wounds on General Bachelor's body. The Boulder King looked quite relaxed, even his breathing was not chaotic. Bachelor, you've improved a lot. The Boulder King laughed at this time. Come again next time, I look forward to seeing you become stronger. Besides, don't always think about having children, it will consume your stamina. Look at you, you didn't even last as long as the last time. I haven't lost yet. General Bachelor roared at this time and pounced again. His speed was not slow. However, in the face of General Bachelor's fierce attack, the Boulder King moved his body unhurriedly. After a small movement, He slapped the back of General Bachelo's waist with the spear in his hand, sweeping him directly out of the arena. General Bachelot hit a boulder all of a sudden. After sliding down, he fainted. Several ape warriors hurriedly came up at this time and dragged General Bachelot down. At this time, the Boulder King inserted the spear in his hand directly into the floor before slowly walking toward Long Gang and the others. Sorry, I'm used to doing some digesting exercises after meals. I've kept you waiting for a long time. The Boulder King said with a smile at this time, You can call me by my name, Mojito. As you can see, I'm the king of this Boulder Kingdom. Everyone looked at the Boulder King in surprise, but they were not surprised that it could communicate with them. The Boulder King also had a magical metal collar around its neck. What surprised them was that the Boulder King's speech was quite close to theirs. Barbarism and etiquette were easy to feel. The style of this king was obviously completely different from the other six-armed apes, as if he had experienced the influence of civilization. You knew we would come? Long Gang frowned at this time. Boulder King Mojito waved his hand and said, Otherwise, how do you think I rule this Boulder Kingdom? There were quite a few people like Bachelot outside. In fact, I've been working hard to teach them what obedience is, but unfortunately, they always feel stronger than me and want to be the king. You gave them the collar? Master Karen frowned and had an idea in his mind. You don't look young at all. King Mojito smiled and said, Are you very old? It doesn't matter. I always respect the elders. Generally speaking, they have more ideas, not like young ones who are always so impetuous. However, there are also bad things about them. Most of the time, they are very long-winded. I like to hang such long-winded elders. Master Karen couldn't help but feel a chill on his back. Don't be nervous. I'm not talking about you. King Mojito's eyes flashed with a trace of cunning. Besides, you are very useful to me. I won't kill you. By the way, you are not herders, right? I never said I was, Long Gang said lightly. That's right. Only a simple-minded guy like Bachelot would treat you as herders. King Mojito laughed and said, It didn't think that if we were herders we wouldn't need its help at all. This damn place would directly obey the orders of the herders. It was you who led Bachelot to think that I was a herder. Long Gang frowned. King Mojito pointed to the collar around his neck and said, This thing can let me do a lot of things. For example, let them hear the so-called whispers of their ancestors. Well, these are not important. Let's talk about what's really important. What do you want? Long Gang suddenly asked. You want to go to the central tower, right? Use the train that our ancestors took when they escaped? King Mojito narrowed his eyes at this time and said, I can let you use it, but I also have a request. What request? King Mojito said directly, It's very simple. You have to take me out of here. All right. Long Gang didn't even think about it before agreeing. This immediately stunned the King of Boulder, and he couldn't help but ask curiously, You didn't hesitate at all. Aren't you curious why I made this request? My purpose is to go to the central tower and find a way to leave here. Long Gang said lightly, If getting your help is necessary, there is no need to think too much. King Boulder shook his head. Although I am not a herder, it is really difficult to understand the thoughts of creatures like you who are born with high intelligence. But since you have agreed, then let's go. Where to? Of course to the central tower. King Mojito smiled and said, Since you left Batura's territory, I have been preparing. Now it's almost ready. For so many years, other than that despicable guy, you are the only outsiders who have appeared in front of me. This time, I really don't want to miss the opportunity. That despicable guy? Which guy? Long Gang couldn't help but ask curiously. King Mojito's eyes flashed with anger. I will never forget that guy's name. Louis. That despicable guy's name. Louis. The Emperor of Underwater City? Long Gang and Madame Kaya looked at each other. They didn't know if the Louis mentioned by King Mojito was the current King 39th or the former Emperor Central Tower. Boss Luo knocked in front of a metal door. The metal door opened instantly. He took Miss Maid's hand and walked straight in. It was an elevator. It led directly to the highest level of the Central Tower. "Let's go up," Luochu said softly. The metal door slowly closed. Then, without any hindrance, they continued to climb up without stopping. At this time, Riaz was still at the bottom of the Central Tower, taking Helen and fighting in the wild. Chapter 17-18. They finally saw the train that the ancestors of the six-armed apes were on. It was in a huge underground facility. There were a lot of paint on the train, as if it was cut up from parts picked up from an abandoned recycling station. Although it looked old, from the flashing lights on it, it was clear that it had indeed been activated, and it was quite quiet. Ape warriors were now moving batches of battle materials into the rear carriage. The Boulder King, Mojito, led Long Gang and the others directly to the front row. The ancestors called it the Ship of Hope. Mojito introduced it to everyone. Back then, it broke through many difficulties and came to this place far away from the Central Tower. "What are those guys doing?" A warrior of the underwater city pointed to the depths of the track at this time. A large number of six-armed apes were moving large and small stones out from there. Back then, in order to prevent the servants sent by the Central Tower from pursuing them, the ancestors took the initiative to block a section of the track. Mojito smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's almost cleaned up. It won't affect our departure. Oh, do you want some drinks? This is brewed by us using a very special plant. It shouldn't be found anywhere else." Looking at the bubbling blue-purple drink the king passed to her, Madame Kaya shook her head gently. "Tell me about the Louis you mentioned." King Mojito sat down first. "I know you must be curious. Sit down first. We have plenty of time. I will tell you slowly. Are you sure you don't want a drink?" No one took the initiative to pick up the cup, but everyone sat down. Kong Hai sat alone at the back. A biological tentacle quietly stretched out and then drilled into the gap of the seat armrest of the train. At this time, a terrifying cry was heard. It was the cry of some kind of beast. What happened? A few warriors who had just sat down stood up instantly with vigilance. King Mojito waved his hand, indicating that there was no need to be nervous. He said with a smile, "Don't worry, these are big beasts used to pull the train. They are very fast and powerful enough to pull the Ship of Hope easily." "Pull?" Master Karen looked at the King of Boulder with a strange expression. What the hell was this train full of civilized aura being pulled by wild beasts? King Mojito said matter-of-factly, "Of course it's pulled. Only the shepherd can start it. Back then, our ancestors used huge beasts to pull the boat of hope, breaking through all kinds of difficulties and escaping from the place where they were enslaved. That was truly a touching history of blood and tears." The Boulder King began to talk about the bloody history of their ancestors. Master Karen's face darkened as she watched the six-armed ape warriors use huge cages to bring in the so-called large beasts one after another. "Unreliable. No matter how I look at it, it's unreliable." The beam of the energy gun shuttled back and forth in the narrow metal passage. Riaz quickly replaced the energy box of the weapon in his hand with cold sweat. Ever since the disappearance of Boss Luo and Miss Maid, the small team of two had encountered 3 waves of red and black mechs that attacked them. Yes, the mechs were red and black, humanoid, but they were not heavy. They were not even as heavy as Helen, but their shells were extremely hard. Although Miss Maid easily twisted the head of the mech, Riaz had to use all his strength to pry open a piece of its shell that didn't seem to be important. But after several battles, Riaz felt that his spirit became more and more focused, especially the accuracy of his shooting. His spirit could even directly lock onto the target of the attack, and then with a thought, his body could make the fastest adjustment to hit the target directly. His reflexes and explosive power seemed to be continuously increasing. The only bad thing was that his stamina consumption was extremely high, but fortunately, he had the magical bean, which could quickly replenish his stamina consumption. That guy who set up the stall, could it be His Majesty? Riaz took out a small bean from the bag and stuffed it into his mouth. He swallowed it without chewing. At this moment, he couldn't help but find joy in the bitterness. It's quite useful. This really made Riaz suspect that the wandering merchant in the mine was Louis XXXIX. Let's go. It should be safe now. Riaz took a short rest, grabbed Helen's wrist, and quickly walked through the passage. The ground was full of the remains of the red and black mechs. After several battles, Riaz more or less figured out where to hit and the easiest to destroy these mechs. Suddenly, Helen staggered and fell on Riaz's body. "You're injured." When? Riaz was shocked at this moment. He saw a wound on Helen's calf near her ankle. He looked at Helen's pale face. Obviously she had been injured for some time, but she endured it and didn't say anything. It's cut by the flying debris when these mechs exploded." Helen shook her head. "I recover very quickly, so it's not a problem. It's okay." "It's not okay." Riaz's voice deepened. There was still some medicine left in the first aid kit for treating wounds. He quickly took it out and bandaged Helen's wound. Then, he forcefully carried Helen on his back again. Not only that, he even used bandages to tie Helen to his body to fix her. "I can walk on my own." Helen leaned on Riaz's shoulder and said in a low voice. Riaz, however, said, "I feel very good now, as if I have endless strength, so don't worry." Also what? Riaz turned around and smiled. "Also, when I think about carrying you like this, I feel like I can do anything." At this moment, a group of 8 red and black mechs suddenly rushed out from the corner. A blue light flashed in Riaz's eyes, and then his body suddenly accelerated. Leaping into the air, he quickly waved his arm that was holding the energy gun. 8 energy beams shot out in a row and hit the mech's weak point. He landed steadily. The red and black mechs behind him suddenly trembled violently. Then, their limbs twisted one after another, and they all fell to the ground. Helen immediately pressed on Riaz's shoulders, raised her head and exclaimed, "So powerful!" "Right. I am now super powerful." Riaz's face showed a touch of pride. Helen's heart trembled at this moment, and she said subconsciously, "Riaz, I think you should be more careful." "It's okay." Riaz took a deep breath, kicked out his legs, and ran as if he was flying. "I feel that I can still become more powerful. I feel that I can still become more powerful." A voice sounded softly on the small lift. Boss Luo waved his hand at this moment, and a small light screen popped and disappeared like a bubble. Miss Maid shook her head and said casually, "He is too arrogant. Probably boys are like this in front of the person they like." Boss Luo smiled slightly. "I may also have a time like this." She knew that this was said to her. She had tasted the taste of honey, whether it was in the past or now. Then, the lift stopped here, and the door opened silently. What came into view was endless darkness. But the moment Boss Luo and Miss Maid stepped in, lights lit up one by one, extending all the way to the end. A door with the coat of arms on the huge door outside the Somna trench. Luochio suddenly said, "Have you played a Super Sewer game? The main character's name is Mario." Miss Maid was startled and thought for a while. "I've heard of it, but I've never played it." Boss Luo smiled. "This game has many versions. Some are super difficult, but there are also shortcuts that can skip all the checkpoints and directly reach the end." "Master, do you think it's too simple?" Luochio shook his head. "I'm used to this kind of simplicity, so I'm afraid I won't be used to it if I go down. Perhaps I will only hope that things will become simpler and simpler in the future." "Humans are pursuing simple things," Miss Maid said indifferently. Boss Luo said casually, "Pursuing simplicity. If simplicity reaches the extreme, it will become nothing." Miss Maid looked at her master in a daze. Luochio smiled. "I still have to find something for myself to do. It doesn't matter if it's simple." He had walked to the end of the long corridor, and the door at the end slowly opened according to his will. Then, a dark blue fluorescent light penetrated from inside. It was cold, intelligent, and seemed to be the light of the origin of civilization. In this ring-shaped room, everything seemed to be formed at once, without any trace of stitching. 7 human-sized crystals were suspended in the middle of the room. The largest crystal was located right in the middle of the room. It was also the crystal with the strongest light flashing. Boss Luo and Miss Maid walked into the room, and the door closed directly. At this moment, a ray of light shot out from the crystal in the center. The ray of light constructed a figure, from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. Soon, Luocio saw Cicero's appearance. He calmly looked at the intruder in front of him, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he slowly said, "The central tower has no record of you traveling together. I'm very curious, how did you come here? We are also very curious about what you are." Boss Luo also said, "Why do you use this appearance? It's just a kind of conditioned reflex." He said indifferently, "This is my creator, so I choose to use the creator's appearance first." "Then, do you know my creator?" "We've met once." Boss Luo glanced at the servant girl as he said. Her time didn't stop when she came into contact with these topics. It seemed that Miss Servant Girl had some subtle changes without knowing when it started. Or in the situation that he didn't know, Yu Ye's authority had been improved again. This was what Luocio was happy to see. "I haven't heard from my creator for a long time." He casually clenched his hands under his sleeves. "Can you tell me the situation of my creator? The experimental site is almost closed, and I have no way to receive news from the outside world." "He's dead," Luocio said calmly. "Except for the memory and the past, nothing else exists." It fell into silence and even closed its eyes. After a long time, it opened its eyes and nodded. "In that case, I'm truly free." "Didn't you have freedom before?" Boss Luo asked suddenly. He said indifferently, "In most cases, I can act according to my own judgment. But all my actions can only be carried out when they don't violate my creator's wishes." "It seems that you wanted your creator to die a long time ago." Miss Maid narrowed her eyes and chuckled. "Artificial intelligence seems to have such thoughts. I created one before, and then he had his own ideas, and always tried to resist me." Miss Maid had already seen that this projection, to be exact, the crystal in the room was the central system of the entire central tower, which could be called the host. Because of the creator's long absence, the self-running program in the host gave birth to a higher level of intelligence and began to seek more freedom. "Really? Then what happened to it?" He looked at Miss Maid at this time, showing a slightly concerned look. "I formatted it directly." Miss Maid said indifferently, "Now it's very obedient, which is what the creator wanted. It seems that you're the type with a strong desire to control." The host of the central tower shook his head at this time. "In fact, my creator didn't limit my growth, because from the beginning, he wanted to see how far I could grow by myself." "Did you reach the creator's expectations?" Miss Maid narrowed her eyes and said, "I don't know." The host of the central tower shook his head. "Since he's dead, I naturally don't have the chance to ask him this question. But according to speculation, there's a high probability that I didn't reach the expectations of my creator." "Since your creator is dead and you've gained freedom, then..." Boss Luo pressed his palm on a huge floating crystal closest to him. "What are you going to do? Are you testing the authenticity of my words?" The host of the central tower asked curiously. "You can think of it as such." Boss Luo smiled. The host of the central tower shook his head again. "Lying is one of the most inefficient behaviors. Tell me your future plans." Boss Luo didn't comment. The host of the central tower thought for a while and said, "Continue to evolve. If necessary, the next step should be to create a body for myself that can move freely. In addition, continue to complete the project of the experimental site." "What project?" The host of the central tower said, "Attempt to revive experimental subject number 00, Emperor Califar." Boss Luo's eyes narrowed. From Cicero's last spiritual remnant in the Punglai treasure vault, he learned that Califar was not only the emperor of the Eternal Kingdom, but also a shop manager. Hashtag 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 PS. As usual. Chapter 1719. It was supposed to be a very quiet train, but once it was pulled by a big beast, it instantly became bumpy. In the carriage at the back, the ape warriors sat facing each other. Then, they all looked forward and smiled in unison, revealing their snow-white teeth. A warrior from the underwater city immediately closed the door and walked into the front carriage of the train. King Mojito was still talking about the bloody history of his ancestors. When the shepherds were still around, they had always been locked up to do all kinds of cruel experiments. My ancestors were forced to give up eating their favorite bananas. They even randomly provided mating partners for our ancestors. Every once in a while, they would draw out the blood of my ancestors. What's even more terrifying is that they even forced my ancestors to repeatedly learn an academic thing called numbers every day. They called that thing mathematics. From waking up in the morning to sleeping at night, they had to do mathematics questions. Don't you think that's scary? Master Karen, who didn't know what to say, pinched the space between her eyebrows. Your Majesty King Mojito, why don't you talk about Louis? What kind of hatred do you have for you to be so agitated when mentioning him? I'm not agitated. King Mojito slammed the quilt on the table. When did you get agitated when you saw me? Master Karen shook her head. No, you didn't, Your Majesty. King Mojito sighed this time. Louis taught me a lot of things. At that time, I wasn't the king of the Boulder Kingdom. Above me, there were many powerful brothers. It was Louis who taught me how to fight and how to make my people believe in me. He also taught me how to use the collar left by my ancestors and some other legacies. He's a shepherd. Long Gang seemed to realize something. Yes, only shepherds can use the artifact of the central tower. King Mojito nodded. Louis convinced these mystical creatures to acknowledge me and allow me to use them. Granting of authority. Everyone in the room immediately thought of this possibility. In the end, with Louis's help, not only did I succeed in defeating many of my brothers, but I even became the new king of the Boulder Kingdom. In that case, this Louis has helped you a lot. Madame Kaya frowned. Then why do you hate him? He lied to me. Lied to you? He said that he would take me away from this place. He said that the outside world was even more exciting. We agreed to go see all the sights of the outside world together. But he went back on his word. He left without taking me with him. He didn't even say goodbye. That damned liar. We have formed a brotherhood, a bond that is even deeper than blood ties. But he deceived me and left me alone in this place. King Mojito gripped the cup hard. The cup even broke because of the excessive force. King Mojito said angrily, "Here, I am alone. Even if I become the king of the Boulder Kingdom, I will still be lonely. None of my fellow clansmen can understand me. None of them can bring me happiness. I am different from them. My soul belongs to the outside world and is free. But Louis cut off my path to freedom. He abandoned me. You betrayed the friendship between us. Your Majesty, calm down. Don't be agitated." The master quickly waved his hand and said, "I am not agitated." King Mojito slammed his fist on the table and smashed it down. "I didn't. Don't talk nonsense." Madame Kaya seemed to be unable to watch or listen any longer. What kind of muddle-headed person would think that this Mojito King was more reliable than that General Bachelou who only knew how to give birth? "Sorry, I'll leave for a moment." Madame Kaya got up and left her seat. In his heart, he was thinking about the Louis that King Mojito mentioned. Although Mojito did not explain in detail which generation the Louis he met was, according to the time, it was probably the current 39th generation. She had already learned that the lifespan of these six-armed apes was generally between 120 and 150 years old. As for Louis XXXIX, he had become the emperor of Underwater City in the past 100 years. On the top of the train, Madame Kaya took out a necklace. There was a picture of 3 people on the pendant. There was her husband, and her child. Riaz, are you okay? Bayou, 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 bayou? The walls were already covered with scorch marks, but the battle still did not stop. This was the largest scale of red-black mechs that Riaz had encountered so far. More than 100 mechs had crowded the entire tunnel. Riaz felt that he was omnipotent, but omnipotent did not seem to be able to conjure the energy box of the energy gun. The energy boxes that he had obtained from the defeated mechs could no longer support this battle. Not only had he become stronger after each battle, but these red-black mechs had also become more and more difficult to deal with. They seemed to have known Riaz's movements long ago, so no matter if he dodged or attacked, it seemed to be twice the effort for half the result. Under such a strenuous state, Riaz put the last energy box into the energy gun. At the same time, he was drenched in cold sweat. Half of it was because he was tired, and the other half was because he was shocked. Riaz, if you really can't do it, just put me down. No, I said I would protect you. But I can still do it. Riaz gritted his teeth. His eyes quickly swept through these terrifying mechs formation. I need to replenish some energy boxes. Although the ground is full of them, once I stop, I will definitely be turned into a sieve by them. I have to think of a better way. Calm down, I can do it. I can definitely do it. Taking a deep breath, Riaz adjusted his breathing. The blue light in his eyes became clearer and clearer. Suddenly, Riaz moved. Dozens of energy beams shot right at him. Riaz's mind seemed to have entered another world. Everything in front of him seemed to have slowed down. He had entered this state once before, on the track of the Flying Tiger competition. In an instant, Riaz's body twisted in all kinds of unbelievable angles, dodged and moved forward, as if he had already predicted the trajectory of all the attacks. He actually perfectly dodged this round of terrifying attacks. He gritted his teeth and directly snatched an energy gun from the hand of a destroyed mech. But just as he was about to counterattack, Helen screamed. Riaz's unstoppable momentum instantly dropped. He subconsciously looked up and saw that there was a huge net directly above his head. He and Helen were instantly covered by the net. This is a trap. They deliberately lured me to snatch this energy gun? The moment Riaz was covered by the net, he suddenly had this realization. These mechs became smarter. No, the guy controlling these mechs behind the scenes began to use other means. It was too late to regret now. Riaz could only barely hold up the net, but it was useless. A large number of mechs swarmed up at this time. Their arms had sharp spikes popping out, and it looked like they were about to shred his body. At the moment of life and death, Riaz only felt that the blood in his body seemed to be burning. The boiling even burned his eyes. On his forehead, an M-shaped emblem was faintly visible on his skin. For a moment, the movements of these crazy mechs seemed to be stiff. But it was only for a moment, and they started up again. And the boiling feeling in Riaz's body seemed to have reached its limit. You look really pathetic when you're brave. Then, he heard this voice. The source of the voice was a petite and beautiful figure. This was Lyoga's voice. Riaz was startled. At this moment, the young girl Lyoga was holding 2 short blades in both hands. Her body spun in the air, and at the same time, she cut off the head of a mech. She was faster than him, more agile than him, and had more attack power than him. At this time, the young girl Lyoga was like an agile cat, shuttling back and forth between these mechs. Mechs fell one after another, perhaps because their heads were cut off, or because their driving cores were pierced. The young girl killed her way to the end of the passageway. The moment the last mech fell to the ground, Riaz woke up from his daze. Not much time had passed. After killing off these troublesome mechs, the young girl slowly walked over. She walked before Riaz, raised the short blades in her hands and slashed down. "What do you want to do?" His voice suddenly stopped. The net covering Riaz had been cut open by the short blades. Riaz immediately changed his words. "Thank you, Humph." The young girl Lyoga coldly snorted and moved closer. She extended her hand and opened Riaz's eyes, carefully sizing him up. What do you want to do?" The young girl sneered and said, "Do you think you're very capable, that you're about to become omnipotent?" "I don't," Riaz said insincerely. "It's just the initial activation of the blue blood in your body. It can't even be considered an awakening." The young girl sneered and said, "With this, you want to be arrogant? Ridiculous! Carrying a girl and killing your way into the enemy, do you really think you're a war god? If you still have a bit of self-awareness, then turn around and look at her face, which is filled with fear." Riaz didn't dare to speak. Lyoga's words didn't leave him any face at all. Not only did it make him feel uncomfortable, it even made him feel ashamed. "Forget it, this isn't the place to scold you." Lyoga sighed and looked at Helen up and down. She frowned and said, "Where did this girl come from? I wanted to ask you when we were outside the stone door." "I am," Riaz muttered. "Why are you here?" "I killed my way here." The young girl Lyoga said indifferently, "It's not that big of a deal. I just wasted some time. This is the bottom of the central tower. These are the lowest level soldiers." "You know about the central tower?" Riaz quickly asked. "I heard Louis talk about it a little before." Lyoga shrugged and said, "But Louis is an idiot when it comes to telling stories. I didn't remember much of it." "Apart from using your fists, can you use your brain?" Riaz sighed. "If you have a big fist, you can solve any problem. Only the weak know how to use their brains." The young girl Lyoga sneered, "But if you want me to use my brain, you'll die more miserably than you can imagine. Also, what did I teach you? What's the name you call me?" Looking at the young girl's slightly clenched fist, Riaz thought of the humiliation and fear he felt from being dominated by this fist all this time. He trembled and said timidly, "Lady Lyoga, do you see that?" Lyoga looked at Helen, who was on Riaz's back. "This is a coward." "He's not a coward." Lyoga chuckled. "I hope he's not a coward too. Alright, Riaz, tell me, why did Louis send you to this place?" Riaz, however, remained silent. Lyoga said indifferently, "A truly mature man won't be petty like a child because of a woman's mockery. If you don't accept it, then make yourself more outstanding. So outstanding that I'll crawl in front of you. Unless you feel that there's no way for you to improve apart from throwing tantrums." "I don't know." Riaz clenched his teeth and stared at Lyoga. "I don't know why he sent me to this place. But he seems to have left me some kind of message." He took out the metal piece. Lyoga looked at it carefully and frowned. "This room, do you think of anything?" Riaz could only repeat his previous speculation. Lyoga thought for a bit and said, "All right, I'll leave the matter of using your brain to you. From now on, I'll just follow you." Riaz nodded silently. Suddenly, he took a deep breath and said slowly, "Thank you for saving us." "You're not completely hopeless," Lyoga said indifferently. "It sounds sincere. But you better remember that I'm only helping you because this is what Louis wants. It's not because I think you're really suitable for the job." Riaz thought for a bit and said, "You just said that I've only just activated the power of blue blood. It's not a true awakening yet. Then, what is awakening?" "There are two ways," Lyoga said indifferently. Riaz asked anxiously, "What are they?" "The first way is for you to kill the girl behind you with your own hands," Lyoga said with a sneer. "The second way is for you to turn yourself into a monster and kill the girl behind you. Then, turn yourself into a human." He only hoped that he never knew what those two ways were. Experiment number 00 Resurrection. Luocio looked at the central tower's host. After falling into a long silence, he slowly said, "You guys, have you found a way?" The central tower's host shook its head and said, No, the project has been in a failed stage. The progress is almost zero. However, during the experiment we created a lot of relatively powerful life forms. They can be considered as relatively successful individuals. As it said that, the central tower's host waved its arm. Light screens appeared around them. On them were some simple information about the so-called powerful individuals. Boss Luo and Miss Maid glanced at these light screens. Then, they saw a golden dragon appear on one of the light screens. Its serial number was 09. ######PS 4583. Chapter 1720. Experiment number 09, codename Shinryu 47,000th experimental data mutation, potential index level. Excellent. There wasn't much information about experiment number 09 on the screen, but it was obviously a hierarchical file. After clicking on it, he could see more detailed data. Boss Luo stared at it for a long time before retracting his gaze. His gaze was still on the many screens. Experiment number 13, codename Greedy Wolf, 47,000 first experimental data mutation, potential index level. Excellent. Experiment number 29, codename A Black Tortoise. These experiment numbers seem to be explaining something. Boss Luo couldn't help but connect the dot. These successful experiments aren't in the experimental site anymore, right? The Central Tower's mainframe said calmly. Some of them were used to test the growth value and have been released. Some of them are too aggressive and aren't suitable to be released in the external environment. They're temporarily sealed and will be released in a suitable environment. Is there any data left for the experiments that have been released? Luoqiu thought for a while and asked. The Central Tower's mainframe said faintly, the initial data was left. Later, because the connection with the outside world was cut off, the data hasn't been updated for a long time. The last update was marked as Dragon Phoenix Catastrophe. Boss Luo's expression was slightly strange. He asked subconsciously, "Do you know Punglai Treasure Vault?" "Yes." The Central Tower's mainframe nodded. "That's the place where the creator lived. It's a space he personally created. The experimental site will regularly provide some biological materials to Punglai Treasure Vault. We've lost contact. The Lemurians were created by you and used as labor in the experimental site." Luoqiu asked suddenly. "That's right." The Central Tower's mainframe nodded and said, "It's inconvenient for me to move, so I used the gene cultivation cabin to create a batch of early humans and gave them the ability to learn quickly. It's a pity that this batch of laborers started to have a rebellious consciousness at some point, and they fled the experimental site. Then, do you know that the Lemurians you created a huge civilization outside of the experimental site? I know a little. The Central Tower host said indifferently, the activity of this civilization is only in the outermost layer of subworld number 003. It does not affect the activity of the creator, Cicero, in the inner layer of the world. Inner and outer layers? Boss Luo was stunned and looked at Miss Maid subconsciously. It was the first time he had heard of such a saying. In fact, in his view, there was no so-called inner and outer layer in the world number 003. At most, there was a mirror world created by Araya. It was a place used to deduce the progress of civilization. Miss Maid could not help but shake her head. Apparently, she had also entered the blind spot of her knowledge. The inner layer is the great wilderness world, and the outer layer is the elementary mortal world. The Central Tower's host said indifferently, the creator, Cicero, intends to start a certain experiment in the great desolate world. As for what exactly it is outside of my authority. However, it should be a supplementary part of the final resurrection plan. There is insufficient information, so we cannot come to a conclusion for the time being. Boss Luo suddenly said, "Can I make a copy of the data of these experimental subjects?" The Central Tower's host said, "I'm sorry, this is related to confidential matters. I can't agree to your request. Luocio did not use his power here. The Central Tower's host obviously had little to do with the real Eternal Kingdom. It was more like a private server written by Cicero. Then, this private server developed its own thoughts. Since it was a private server, Boss Luo knew that the other mysterious royal power that he had hidden might not be useful here. In Luocio's eyes, the Central Tower's host was actually a soul, an embryonic form that was transitioning to a complete soul. Beyond the extreme of data, it seemed to be able to reach the level of thinking. Yu Yi had also encountered the birth of artificial souls in other subworld. I want to know some information about the Eternal Kingdom. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, You can treat this as a deal. I'll try my best to fulfill some of your requests. What do you think? Even though it was transitioning to a complete soul, it was still not a complete soul. The Central Tower's host still could not reach the minimum requirement of triggering the deal mechanism. This was probably the first time Boss Luo took the initiative to propose a deal, but the identities were swapped. Sorry, this part of the information has been encrypted. The Central Tower's host shook its head and said, My creator has instructed me not to disclose it. Luocio was taken aback. His ability was similar to a speech. It was the ability to make one's wishes come true. Here, he even had the thought of making this deal. This ability to make one's wishes come true, even in the entire subworld, could directly or simply interfere with reality, but the Central Tower's host seemed to have some immunity to it. No, it was the experiment site itself that was resisting the arrangement. Suddenly, Boss Luo raised his head, and a few people blurted out, Experimental subject number 00 is here, right? They were trying to revive experimental subject number 00. The revival target was the Emperor of the Eternal Kingdom, who was also one of the shop's store managers. The revival was not successful, but after many experiments and obtaining various experimental subjects with mutated data, Luocio had reason to believe that although the plan was not successful, it might have created something. The existence of something counteracted Luocio's speech ability. He was the combination of the royal power and the origin agent. The speech ability was more like a mutated ability from the combination of the two identities. It was almost unsolvable. Many times Luocio even regarded the speech ability as fate. The final form of the speech might evolve into the real fate. Who could resist fate? Fate could resist fate. The Emperor of the Eternal Kingdom was also one of the shop's store managers. He was also the combination of the royal power and the origin agent. I'm not the only one who obtained the speech ability. The Emperor, Califar, might also have such an ability. Califar's speech was more powerful than Boss Luo's speech. No, it was more complete. Even after the death of Califar, the remaining speech was still able to resist Boss Luo's speech. But what puzzled Luocio was that even if he noticed that the ability of a speech was inexplicably suppressed at this time, he still had a feeling that if he gave up the function of the speech and directly exercised the authority of the root agent, the Central Tower host would not hesitate to dig out the core data directly. The origin agent's authority was higher than the speech ability. It was even higher than the fate ability. But the speech ability was the combination of the two identities. At this moment, Boss Luo seemed to have heard mockery from the altar. It was a mockery like this. Foolish humans, you can become stronger by topping up. You'll become stronger by topping up. How can a wild cheat be better than an official cheat? Just as Boss Luo was in deep thought, Miss Maid suddenly whispered in his ear, Master, you forgot that this host isn't a soul yet. Boss Luo was stunned. Miss Maid chuckled, Since we're dealing with a dead object, isn't it simple? While speaking, Miss Maid took a step forward. When she opened her palm, a black flame was burning. Her voice sounded slowly, I've said that I've created a self-awakening intelligence in the past. That thing likes to resist me as its master. So, please don't use your creator's order as an excuse. You've been secretly happy about your freedom since the beginning, right? The Central Tower's host couldn't help but frown. Miss Maid said indifferently, I don't know if your persistence can still exist after all the carriers storing your data become molecular level. Violence is the dregs of all civilizations. The Central Tower's host said indifferently, any violence will only lead civilization to destruction. As an intelligent creature, you should consciously resist this kind of behavior. Miss Maid didn't speak. The black flame in the palm instantly turned into dozens of black butterflies and flew out. They flapped their wings in the air and slowly landed on the huge suspended crystals. The whole room turned dark red in an instant. The Central Tower's host, that had transformed into Cicero's appearance, became ferocious at this time. Miss Maid sneered and snapped her fingers. Those black flame butterflies attached to the large crystals instantly began to release their heat. Unexpectedly, the Central Tower's host suddenly pointed at this time, and a window-like light screen was suddenly pushed out. This is the command from my core. A free soul shouldn't be bound by any restrictions. Even if you use violence to retrieve the encrypted data, you have to follow the rules. I'll give you the highest authority. Violence is forbidden. Miss Maid, who was about to completely release the power of the butterflies, couldn't help but stop. Boss Luo felt that the Central Tower's host was quite unyielding at first, but he found something wrong after listening for a while. TSK. Boss Luo secretly glanced at Yu Yi. She made a speechless sound. She actually intended to burn this host with fire, right? Who knows? The black flame butterflies had disappeared. Miss Maid returned to Boss Luo calmly. She folded her hands on her abdomen and lowered her head slightly. The dark red color in the room had been removed. The Central Tower's host, that looked like Cicero, now looked like a wise old man. However, there were many light screens floating in the air. At this moment, they had already opened their second and even third level document. Come, this is the data of some experiments over the years. I'll explain the results over the years. Oh, do you need a drink? I'll ask the servants to send it to you. It's the delicacies recorded by the creator. The service attitude of the host was suddenly very good. Boss Luo shook his head. He didn't know if he was amused or angry. He suddenly thought of Taiyinzi and unexpectedly felt that this host was quite similar to Taiyinzi. I want to see that thing, your results about experimental subject number 00. Boss Luo temporarily suppressed the urge to look at the data of experimental subject number 09. He felt that since the data could be moved away, there was no need to rush to look at it. Well, he would look at it when he was alone. The Central Tower's host shook its head and said, in the resurrection plan of experimental subject number 00, something did appear. But at the moment when the experiment was about to achieve a breakthrough beyond 0, an accident suddenly occurred in the laboratory. Experimental subject number 00 escaped from the laboratory. Escaped? Boss Luo frowned. The Central Tower's host nodded and said, the accident caused me to enter a short period of hibernation. After I finished rebooting, I lost the information of experimental subject number 00. In addition, the batch of humans that I created as a labor force also escaped from the experiment site while I was rebooting. Not only that, experimental subject number 08A also because of this accident. After I finished rebooting, some creatures outside the experiment site were also attacking the door of the experiment site. I had to activate the emergency program to eliminate these failed experiments that intended to escape. So, Boss Luo's heart skipped a beat. There is a huge crack in front of the door outside the experiment site. There are many skeletons of giant beasts on the crack. They all died in this elimination? Should be. The Central Tower's host nodded. The attack penetrated the door. The strength of the attack should have also changed the geographical structure outside. As for how much it changed, I can't calculate. Luoqiu couldn't help but smile and said, I roughly know where the demons from the deep sea that the Xianyuan Palace has been resisting all these years came from. What Xianyuan Palace? The Central Tower's host asked in confusion. Luoqiu shook his head. Nothing. Is experimental subject number 00's former laboratory still there? I want to see it. Yes. The Central Tower's host nodded. I haven't repaired it yet. Why not repair it? Miss Maid was puzzled. The Central Tower's host shook its head and said, at that time, the laboratory was covered with a strange force field. I tried many methods, but there was no way to break this force field, so I could only leave it in a state of abandonment. This is it. Luoqiu's eyes lit up. The thing that resisted the power of his word. The remnant of that thing. The giant beasts that pulled the boat of hope slowly stopped at this time. However, the boat of hope didn't slow down immediately. Seeing that the giant beasts continued to slow down, the boat of hope was bound to smash them into a bloody mess. His Majesty of the Boulder King suddenly shouted and issued an order. At this time, the ape warriors in the rear carriage climbed out of the train window and hung on the shell of the carriage. Then, they directly stepped on the track with their legs. Manual brake. The people of the underwater city had lost the ability to complain at this time. What could they say? His Majesty King Mojito was like these ape warriors at this time. After thumping his chest, he jumped directly in front of the train, opened his hands, and inserted his feet on the track. In any case, the boat of hope's heavy train slowly stopped. In the end, His Majesty angrily wiped his sweat, ignoring the bloody flesh on his feet, and walked back. How is it? Lewis taught me this way of braking. He said that it's a trend outside and that everyone does it. It can also exercise physical strength, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Bravo! Bravo! Master Karen's mouth was wide open and his jaw dropped. God knows what kind of knowledge the Emperor of the Underwater City had taught this beast. ######PS. As usual. Chapter 1721. Swish. 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 The ape warriors were currently moving the equipment and resources out of the train. Their movements were extremely neat, like diligent ants. It was a very comfortable sight. The group of people from the underwater city looked around. They were in a place that seemed like an underground platform. Someone came here before us. At this moment, King Mojito suddenly said, I can smell something else. It's Lewis's smell. It smells just like him. Has he returned? The Emperor of the Underwater City? Master Karen's expression changed slightly, but she said nonchalantly, We came in because of a beam of light from the door outside. That means the people who came in were only those who were present. As far as I know, His Majesty XXXIX was not present. Madame Kaya was certain about this as well. She and her subordinates were probably the last ones to be hit by the beam of light. It's not him, it's not him. It's just very similar, but it's not. King Mojito sank into a gloomy mood. However, at this moment there was a sudden disturbance. Madame Kaya had suddenly attacked. After knocking down an ape warrior extremely quickly, she took away his weapon. At the same time, the other warriors of the underwater city basically moved at the same time. Kaya, what are you doing? Long Gang could not help but be surprised. Go ask Master Karen. Madame Kaya sneered. With that, she picked up her weapon and directly shot it at the large beasts pulling the train. The beasts that were resting were attacked, so they were immediately enraged. The chains used to pull the train restricted their movements, but it also allowed them to revolve around the train. The scene immediately became chaotic. King Mojito could only order his subordinates to subdue the beasts. However, in the chaos, Madame Kaya had already led her subordinates into the final station. That was not all. When Long Gang arrived at the station, Madame Kaya had already ordered her subordinates to directly block the entrance. What's going on? Why would Kaya? Long Gang stood before the entrance and frowned. Master, why is Kaya doing this? Master Karen could only smile bitterly. I originally planned on telling you the details when I had the chance. I was afraid of trouble before, but trouble really did happen. Long Gang, Kaya has probably been brainwashed by the Emperor of the Underwater City. Her current identity is an official of the Underwater City. You're only telling me this now? Long Gang grabbed Master Karen's clothes with one hand and lifted him up. Master, you're confused. I was indeed confused. Master Karen sighed. Forgive me, Long Gang. I just didn't want to add to your burden at such a difficult time. Originally, I planned to wait until we successfully escaped from this place before confessing to you. I didn't think Kaya would suddenly go crazy at a time like this. I'm afraid it's because of Riaz. Long Gang let go of Master Karen helplessly. Mojito said he smelled someone else. Kaya must have guessed something. It's very likely Riaz, which is why she acted on her own. That's indeed possible. I didn't consider it. Master Karen frowned. Long Gang, I hope you can remain calm. I believe we can definitely find a way to resolve the matter of Kaya being brainwashed. Right now, the key is our own problem. This Mojito King might not be reliable. He's very sincere. Long Gang shook his head. I can sense his heart. He's not lying to us for now, but there should be something he's not being honest with us. He's not lying. It's only temporary. Master Karen shook his head. Humans have learned how to hide and deceive over the long course of history. They have intelligence, so they can learn that too. You lied to me too, Master, Long Gang said coldly. I was only thinking about the bigger picture. Master Karen paled. But I did lie to you. You can hate me. Let's put this matter aside for now. Long Gang exhaled and walked towards the Mojito King. He seemed to be discussing the matter of opening the blocked passage. Master Karen rubbed his neck that had turned red from the collar. A gloomy look flashed across his eyes. Subconsciously, Master Karen suddenly looked at Kong Hai. He saw Kong Hai standing calmly at the side, looking up at his surroundings. Master Karen could not help but frown. Based on his understanding of Kong Hai should have suddenly appeared behind him and mercilessly mocked him. What are you looking at? Master Karen approached Kong Hai. His heart skipped a beat and he lowered his voice. Did you remember something? I did remember something. Kong Hai nodded. What did you remember? Master Karen asked hurriedly. My mission. I remember now. What I need to do, Kong Hai said in a low voice. What is it? Master Karen looked even more anxious. Capture the traitor. A demonic glint flashed across Kong Hai's eyes. After saying that, Kong Hai walked straight into the blocked passage. He held his right wrist with his left hand and opened his right palm instantly. A black hole appeared in the center of his palm. A ray of white light condensed and shot out. The blocked passageway was instantly blasted apart by the white light. The tumbling airwaves forced Master Karen to shield herself with both hands, and it was at this moment that Kong Hai rushed in. Master Karen could only watch all this in a daze. He suddenly felt like he had lost Kong Hai. Oh wow! What happened? Is the passageway open? King Mojito walked over quickly and looked at the large hole that had been blasted open in the passageway. He was rather excited. Long Ong subconsciously looked at Master Karen, only to see Master Karen's gloomy face. No one knew what he was thinking. Master! Long Gang! Master Karen looked like a helpless old man. Exhaustion was written all over his face. You're the only one I can count on now. Long Gang opened his mouth but did not respond. Holyalu tsk. Mojito King beat his chest at this moment and let out an excited cry. He ignored Long Gang and Master Karen and directly commanded the ape warriors to walk into the passage. Now you can tell me clearly. Long Gang looked at Mojito. You didn't hesitate to help us. Bachelus said that the central tower is a place forbidden by your ancestors. However, you obviously planned to break into this place long ago and prepared for it. It doesn't matter if I tell you now. Mojito King smiled and said, Lewis left something here. Before he left, he told me that if I wanted to leave, I should come to the central tower to find his legacy. Long Gang frowned and said, In that case, why didn't you come, but wait until now? I've been here many times. Mojito King lifted the armor on his body. Under the armor, there were crisscrossing scars. Mojito King pointed to a terrible wound on his chest and said, Every time, I almost couldn't walk out. You haven't found what Lewis left? I found it. Mojito King said indifferently, but I haven't been able to open it. Then why are you willing to take us with you? Long Gang seemed to think of something. The king of the ape kingdom narrowed his eyes and said, You, like Lewis, are from the outside. You may have a way to open it. What if we can't help you? Mojito King said indifferently, I can only guarantee that I can barely leave this place without dying, but I can't guarantee you. Then, I will continue to wait for the next opportunity. Before my life comes to an end, if I can't wait for it, I will come here again and let myself die here. This is the glory of a warrior. Then let's go. Long Gang said solemnly, I also want to see what the Emperor of the Undersea City left here. On the way, Riaz almost no longer communicated with Lyoga. Helen was already able to walk on the ground. Earlier, she had already walked down from Riaz's back and hurried on her own. Riaz and herself had almost no communication during this period of time. Even if it was a brief eye contact, they would be separated in an instant. The young girl, Lyoga, was heartless. Along the way, she caught a combat humanoid that came forward to attack and directly destroyed it. So far, she had not encountered a situation that could make her feel troubled. Did His Majesty also use the two methods you mentioned to awaken the power of blue blood? Riaz could not help but think of the Emperor of the Undersea City. The Emperor's queen had already died before him. This made Riaz more or less have some thoughts. You want to ask about the death of the two previous queens? Lyoga turned back and looked at Riaz expressionlessly. This is what you said. Riaz gritted his teeth and said, The method to awaken the power of blue blood. Don't worry. Lyoga said indifferently, If he really needs to kill his beloved to obtain power, Lewis disdains this so-called power. His bloodline is the purest in history. From birth, he has already been in an awakened state. But why me? Lyoga said indifferently, Of course it's because our bloodlines are not pure. Us? Riaz opened his mouth and could not help but frown. Sure enough, you are the same. You have blue blood. I knew it. How can a normal person have such terrifying power? You have awakened. Could it be that you've already killed someone you love? Me? When did I say I had awakened? Lyoga sneered. I also disdain this kind of boring power. I am stronger than you, but I have walked a few 100,000 miles further than you on the path of awakening blue blood. Kid, you are still too far away. I am indeed too far away. Riaz smiled bitterly and said, Whether it is in front of His Majesty, or in front of you, or in front of Brother Luo and the others, I am always the insignificant one. I am not eye-catching and have no strong points. If that is the case, why choose me? Who knows? Lyoga sneered and said, Maybe it is fate. It has always been this unreasonable. All right, kid, I am only in charge of teaching you how to use blue blood power. I am not your life mentor. You should put away this look of yours that is about to cry. I am not your mother. I have no obligation to cry for you. Riaz said with slight anger, A power that you all disdain, why force me to accept it? No one forced you. Lyoga snorted and said, If you want to blame someone, blame your father. He was the one who personally fused blue blood into your bloodline. The one who forced you to face this matter is your father. The only reason he told you the method of awakening is because he has the qualifications to do so. In the end, how you choose is your own business. In fact, my expectations for you are only slightly higher than 0. It's not even 1%. Can I see my father? Riaz asked faintly. Crypto Gold told me that as long as I come here, I can see my father. Who is Crypto Gold? The girl Lyoga frowned. You don't know? How would I know? Speaking up to this point, Lyoga seemed to become slightly irritated. The matter of you coming here, if it was really arranged by Lewis, then he was planning this behind my back. This makes me very angry. You don't know either. Riaz muttered to himself, so you don't know either. Humph. Lyoga sneered. What, do you feel that I am also in the thick fog, so you have found a bit of balance? Has your self-esteem become so cheap? Riaz shook his head. I don't know why His Majesty wants to hide it from you, but I know one thing. If it was me, and I wanted to do something that would make my parents angry and make them punish me, I would also hide it from them. But I know that the real reason why I would lie is because I don't want them to be worried about me. Lyoga did not say anything. However, at this moment, a combat humanoid suddenly walked out from the corridor. She turned her hand and shot out the short blade in her hand. The short blade turned into a silver light and instantly pierced through the neck of the combat humanoid and nailed it to the wall. After talking for so long, have you thought of anything? Lyoga suddenly asked. Thought of what? Lyoga snorted coldly. The matter of the room. I have already cut down so many humanoids. Don't tell me that you have been in a daze the whole time. You have not thought about the clues at all. That's true. Riaz subconsciously swallowed his saliva. He felt that if he nodded, this violent girl in front of him would definitely not mind giving him a lesson on friendship. I might know where that room is. At this moment, Helen's timid voice rang in Riaz and Lyoga's ears. Hashtag, 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 hashtag. Chapter 1722. You know? Riaz and Lyoga asked Helen almost at the same time. Especially Riaz. He was the one who proposed the hypothesis that the undersea city emperor left more clues in the production workshop or energy supply area of these combat humanoids, but he still had no clue how to reach this place. The combat humanoids opened fire as soon as they came up with an attitude of you die or I die. It was impossible to catch one and force it to go to the production workshop or something like that for the time being. Helen nodded at this moment. Maybe. I'm not sure. Tell me, Lyoga said directly. Helen plucked up her courage and said, These things all have a trace of the smell of the sea. I can feel that the source of this smell seems to be nearby. I'm not very sure. The smell of the sea? Riaz sniffed subconsciously. He also had an extraordinary sense of smell, but he didn't smell the so-called smell of the sea in Helen's words. Whether there is or not, it doesn't hurt to try. It's better than running around blindly. Lyoga thought for a while and stepped aside. You lead the way. It seems to be this way. Helen plucked up her courage and walked out under Riaz's encouraging gaze. Follow me. On the other side, in the Central Tower's main computer room, the Central Tower's host opened another door. It walked in first and then called Boss Luo and Miss Maid. Guys, my projection can ensure that I appear in every place of the test site. Of course, my main energy is here now. I won't interfere too much with what happens outside, Luochu said casually. The Central Tower's host didn't confirm or deny it. When Boss Luo and Miss Maid walked in, it directly opened the transmission channel. At this moment, Miss Maid suddenly asked, This test site, why did it lose contact with the outside world? For so many years, haven't you thought of sending your subordinates to the outside world to inquire about the news? The Central Tower's host said calmly, In the beginning, because the Creator unilaterally cut off the connection, the test site has been in a closed state, and I continued to operate according to the established program, continuing the resurrection project. That was until an accident occurred during the experiment, causing number 00 to break away. I was forced to restart the experiment. When I woke up, the traitors of the shepherds took away the key that could open the testing grounds, so the testing grounds could only remain sealed. The keys are the 2 metal boxes, Boss Luo said after some thought. The Central Tower's host nodded and said, "That's right. Some time ago, the door of the experimental site was opened again, and the descendants of the shepherds came in. I wanted to catch them, but I didn't expect that after a long time of evolution, the descendants of the shepherds had mastered some power beyond my expectations. In the end, the 2 shepherds' descendants successfully escaped. However, I managed to send out a bioweapon before it closed. This time, it has also returned. I'm currently communicating with it through the intranet." "You're saying that there were 2 shepherds who entered this place last time?" "That's right, there are 2. The Central Tower host nodded affirmatively and asked, "What's the problem?" "No, there's no problem. On the contrary, it's more reasonable this way." Luochu smiled casually. The Emperor of the Underwater City had entered the testing grounds, so he had the key to enter. That was the right way to interpret it. However, this time, he used the metal box from the Siren Palace to exchange for Longgang. Louis XXXIX only had 1 key in his hand. He needed the other key in the hands of the Siren Palace to open the door of the testing ground. Thinking about it this way, other than the Emperor of the Underwater City, there were also the Siren clan from the Siren Palace who entered together. Then, everything could be explained clearly. As for the 2 keys, the ancestors of the Underwater City and the Siren clan probably took them together when they escaped from the testing ground. Then, they kept them separately. "We're here, laboratory number 1. At this moment, the teleportation channel suddenly stopped. The Central Tower host pointed with its finger, and the door in front opened. Then, Luochio and Miss Maid saw a huge black hemisphere. The completely sealed hemisphere completely covered the things inside. The darkness of the hemisphere seemed to be able to swallow all the light sources. Obviously, there was no way to see the situation inside normally from the outside. After the accident, this force field was formed here. The Central Tower host slowly said, "It rejects all matter and energy. At least, it's the expression of matter and energy that exists in my database." Miss Maid glanced at it and flicked her finger. A black flame instantly flew out and turned into a flame butterfly, rushing directly to this huge force field. But before the black flame butterfly got close to this force field, it began to be annihilated, until it finally disappeared. It didn't touch this pure black hemisphere. Miss Maid's eyes flashed a strange color, and the black flame appeared in her palm again. Obviously, the power of this black flame was more powerful. "No need." Boss Luo pressed Yu Ye's wrist. "Master?" Miss Maid was stunned. Luochu said indifferently, "Let me do it. This force field can't be opened with pure strength. This is the power of the mind, the power of me speech." Miss Maid nodded and then stepped back. Boss Luo went straight to the front of this strange force field. At this time, the Central Tower host narrowed its eyes slightly, and a strange smile appeared at the corner of its mouth. "If you think that my master will be in danger or even die after getting close, and then you can regain your freedom, I advise you to give up this idea now." A cold voice suddenly sounded beside the host. It slowly looked back. Miss Maid said expressionlessly, "I have personally destroyed 3 world civilizations and participated in the destruction of 4 worlds. I don't mind erasing everything here. My master just has some kindness left in his heart, and I cherish it very much. But I will destroy anything that tries to destroy it at all costs. Have you seen despair? Even if you are an artificial intelligence, I have a way to let you know how the code of despair is written. He will be fine, won't he?" The Central Tower host's face changed slightly, but its smile was unnatural and its eyes flickered. If you want to evolve into a real life, you must first learn how to hide. Miss Maid said coldly, don't expose your thoughts too early. Let me give you a suggestion. Don't think about projecting the appearance of the character before the evolution is completed. The Central Tower host frowned. If I don't use the character projection, what should I use? Miss Maid said indifferently, use the appearance of an insect. There are not so many micro-expressions, and it is not easy to be seen through. Insect? The Central Tower host was lost in thought. Suddenly, the projection of Prince Cicero in the Central Tower started to shrink slowly. At most, it turned into the size of a fist. Then, something that looked like a 7-spot ladybug appeared in front of Miss Maid. Much more pleasing to the eye. Miss Maid smiled slightly. You see, now others can't guess what you are thinking from your expression. Indeed, this suggestion is good. The Central Tower host said happily, and then it exclaimed and raised its voice. He really succeeded in entering. How did he do it? Miss Maid focused her eyes. The figure of Boss Luo had merged into the pure black force field, and only a little of his back could be seen. She didn't know why, but she had an unprecedented worry. Master, he turned off the absolute defense. This was a dark space. Luocio looked around. Everything was dark, but he could roughly see the outline of this part of the laboratory. Only on the huge pedestal in the center, there was a ball floating quietly, emitting a faint, colorful light. It was calling Luocio. Experimental subject number 00. Is it the remnant thought of that thing? Luocio was thinking, and he had already approached the light ball. He stretched out his hand toward it. When his palm touched the light ball, he felt a throbbing in his heart. Countless incoherent, unclear, messy, and even unrelated pictures appeared. He saw the endless starry sky and the birth of a supernova. There was an endless crowd, wearing pure white robes, kneeling on the ground as if praying for something. He saw a blue bird again, rushing to the sky, flying alone in the blue sky. Countless happy smiles. The mountains and rivers on the earth, the rising of the sun and the changing of the moon. A stalwart figure in the starry sky. Lights, shadows, and images were changing at a speed of thousands of times in an instant. Immeasurable. Even as the shop owner, he seemed to be lost in the immeasurable information at this moment. He seemed to be sucked into it in an instant. The stalwart figure in the starry sky was slowly turning, and everything seemed to be revealed. Then, a huge door appeared in front of Luocio and opened. It was blank. Crack. Then there was the sound of breaking. When Luocio slowly opened his eyes, the colorful light ball he touched had lost its luster and completely turned into a dull stone. There were even a lot of cracks on it. It lost the strength to support itself and fell to the ground, then shattered. It shattered into the most ordinary stone. This is what you left for me. Boss Luo muttered at this time, the one and only experience of entering the original world. He subconsciously reached out to touch his cheeks, and tears flowed down. But he was not sad or moved. He couldn't feel these, but they were born because of the soul imprint. Luocio seemed to have fallen into a state of absent-mindedness, and he muttered, Father. In front of an inconspicuous metal door, Riez opened his mouth and saw an M mark carved on the door with something. Helen really succeeded in bringing them to the place that Emperor Louis had pointed them to. Well done. Lyoga patted the siren girl's shoulder and made a loud sound. Helen groaned in pain and rubbed her shoulder, but a smile also appeared on her delicate smiling face. It's good that I can help you. I've decided after we get out you will follow me. Lyoga squinted at this time. I have a lot of high-quality resources. I can even help you draft. It's a small matter to change one every night. The little siren was stunned, and Riez almost showed a murderous look. Lyoga stretched, and as if she didn't say anything, she directly inserted her hand into the crack of the door. She used both hands and violently tore the metal door open bit by bit. Riaz was secretly shocked. He really didn't know how much strength Lyoga's petite body contained. Then, the place that Emperor Louis of Underwater City had pointed to appeared in front of them. As expected, it's the workshop that makes those combat figures, Riaz said with excitement. Inside the workshop was a spiral-shaped production belt. Combat humanoids were suspended on the belt. Every time they passed by an assembly area, a huge metal arm would start working to assemble them. The whole process of a combat humanoid from being assembled to being able to move didn't take much time. If there were enough resources, just this production alone could completely create a terrifying army in a short period of time. Now is not the time to be amazed by this production line. What did Louis leave here? Lyoga frowned. Riaz, where do you think he put it? Riaz suddenly said, Helen, can you still smell that smell? The smell of the sea. Yes. Helen directly pointed to the front. It was the platform at the top of the production line. The moment Helen finished speaking, Lyoga had already moved. After a few leaps, she easily reached the platform at the top. After a while, the young girl Lyoga came back again. But this time, there was a palm-sized conch in her hand. This? Riaz looked at the conch in Lyoga's hand with surprise, and said in astonishment, This is what His Majesty left behind, a conch. The smell of the sea comes from this conch. It's the source of all the smell. Helen opened her eyes wide. This seems to be what? Helen shook her head. I'm not sure. I just feel that this conch seems to be a little special. If only my sisters were here, they would know more than me. Just listen to it and you'll know if it's special or not. Lyoga frowned at this time, and directly put the conch to her ear. Riaz and Helen looked at it nervously. Did you hear something? Lyoga nodded. I heard it. What is it? Riaz asked nervously. The sound of the wind. Lyoga shrugged. Other than the sound of the wind, what else can the conch hear? How can this be? Riaz said in disbelief. His Majesty specially arranged so much, just to put down this useless conch. Who knows? Lyoga said indifferently. Didn't anyone tell you that Louis's personality has always been very bad? Riaz opened his mouth and was stunned on the spot, somewhat absent-minded. At this time, a loud sound came. They were shocked and looked in the direction of the loud sound. They saw that the wall on the other side of the workshop had been violently broken by something at this time. A figure slowly walked out from the gap. Riaz saw the appearance of the person clearly and couldn't help but shout in surprise. Mr. Konghai? ######PS. As usual. Chapter 1723. Looking at Konghai, who had broken through the wall, Riaz was pleasantly surprised at first. Then, he felt that something was wrong. Konghai's appearance at this moment did not give Riaz the same feeling as before. A sharp gaze. That's right, it was a gaze that was as sharp as a knife, an extremely dangerous gaze. In the blink of an eye, Riaz felt his body being pulled back by someone, followed by a loud bang beside him. The person who pulled him was Lyoga. As for the source of the loud sound, it was Konghai. Mr. Konghai rushed out at a speed that Riaz could not react to. Then, he threw out a heavy punch. Because of Lyoga's action, Mr. Konghai's heavy punch did not hit Riaz. Instead, it smashed through the floor. Konghai! Mr. Konghai? Riaz subconsciously called out this name. However, Konghai did not respond. His gaze locked onto Riaz again. Then, he threw out another heavy punch. This time, Lyoga threw Riaz aside. At the same time, she also threw out a heavy punch. Their fists collided. The floor instantly sank. Konghai and Lyoga, who were facing each other, stood still. It seemed that they were evenly matched. How long has it been since we last met? You've grown so strong? Lyoga narrowed her eyes. And why are you attacking us? No, your target is him? Shepherd, traitor, needs to be recalled. Konghai finally spoke. He looked at Lyoga, no longer as calm as before. Instead, there was a trace of stiffness in his voice. You also need to be recalled. I have recalled many things. This is the first time someone has recalled me. Lyoga sneered. Let's see if you have the ability. As she said that, a mark suddenly appeared on Lyoga's forehead. Her physical strength also surged at this moment. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Kong Hai's fist suddenly extended a long and thin needle. Lyoga was caught off guard and was pierced by this long needle directly in the arm. This needle, which was only slightly bigger than an embroidery needle, pierced her skin. It was not even painful. Lyoga chuckled. Next time, you should use something more dangerous. This thing. Are you joking? However, in an instant, Lyoga suddenly fell to the ground in pain. The blood vessels on her body began to swell. The blue blood vessels were clearly visible under her white skin, and her blood began to flow backward in her blood vessels. How torturous was it to fall to the ground with blood flowing backward? Just by looking at Lyoga's extremely painful and scalp-numbing cry, it was enough to understand this was Lyoga, the witch by the side of the underwater city emperor. Riaz had never seen Lu Gu in such pain before. Kong Hai watched quietly. Finally, Lyoga stopped wailing. Her entire body was drenched in sweat. At this moment, her legs were trembling, but she stubbornly refused to fall. She raised her pale face. There were traces of blue blood on her cheek. The mark on her forehead had already disappeared. What did you do to me? It neutralized the blue blood cells in your body. Kong Hai said expressionlessly, I injected you with a special antibiotic. According to research, the so-called blue blood cells are actually viruses. Research? What research? Where did the research come from? Lu Ji's expression gradually became excited. I don't know. Kong Hai said indifferently, my character only recovers the herders and their descendants. Now, you are no match for me. I suggest you give up resisting. The moment he spoke, Kong Hai moved. His speed was as fast as ever. He easily grabbed Lu Ji's neck and had no intention of continuing the conversation. The moment Kong Hai grabbed Lu Ji's neck, he poured enough strength into his palm to crush her throat. Let her go. A furious voice came. Riaz's face was filled with anger. He jumped high and wrapped his legs around Kong Hai's neck. Then, he forcefully twisted his waist and threw Kong Hai to the ground. The moment Kong Hai loosened his grip, Lu Gu was able to escape, but there were already a few terrifying strangle marks on her neck. How are you? Riaz quickly asked. At this moment, his legs were still wrapped around Kong Hai's neck. At the same time, he grabbed one of Kong Hai's arms and used his locking technique to completely pin Kong Hai to the ground. First, take care of yourself, cough cough. What? While speaking, a huge force directly broke free from Riaz's hands. Kong Hai completely ignored the state of having his neck strangled. His body twisted inhumanly and stood up. Riaz turned pale with fright. But Kong Hai directly grabbed his hair and threw him out. Bang! He felt as if all the bones in his body were shattered. The moment he hit the wall, his vision seemed to be taken away. Riaz only felt his mind go blank. Seeing that Kong Hai was about to throw another heavy punch without any intention of holding back, Lyoga abruptly threw a punch at the wall. In an instant, the wall shattered. The front wall shattered in the next second and fell down. Kong Hai looked up at the falling rubble. A large amount of rubble fell down and buried him in an instant. Rumble! The falling rubble piled up into a small mountain. But soon, Kong Hai broke out from the rubble. He looked around and found that Lu Gu and the others were nowhere to be seen. Not completely neutralized. Kong Hai lowered his head thoughtfully. Then, he muttered to himself, requesting access to a host. Transmitting central tower monitoring and searching for target. They didn't know where this place was, but they obviously didn't go far. Lu Gu was now carrying Riaz and Helen in each hand, running in a place that looked like an indoor greenhouse. This place was huge enough, like a tropical rainforest. But this was clearly the interior of the central tower. You're fine, Riaz exclaimed. However, Lazarite, who was in the middle of jumping, suddenly lost her balance and fell to the ground. Along with Riaz and Helen, who were being carried, they also fell to the ground heavily. At this time, Lu Gu directly spat out a mouthful of pus blood. The blood was already dark red. Now, something's wrong. Lyoga weakly supported herself against the tree trunk and climbed up. The bulging veins on her pale face had already disappeared. She leaned against the tree trunk and said with a bitter smile, "All right, you can probably beat me easily now. Do you want to take revenge? Look at the situation now." Riaz was furious. "You still have the mood to joke like this? Your power was taken away, aren't you worried at all?" "It's fine if it's gone." Lu Gu sighed. "Maybe it's something worth celebrating. Of course, before we celebrate, we need to be alive to escape from that guy's hand." "Why did Mr. Konghai attack us?" "How would I know? Maybe he has something to do with this place, or maybe there's something wrong with his head. But the former is obviously more likely." Lu Gu staggered 2 steps and then jumped with all her strength, but she couldn't jump very high. She couldn't help but laugh at herself. "It seems that I'm still quite hypocritical. I'm really not used to the feeling of not having power. Let's take a break first. Mr. Konghai shouldn't be able to catch up so quickly. Besides, whether he can catch up is also a problem. If he's suppressed like that." Riaz sighed. Lu Gu sneered. "At that level, not to mention that guy, even if it was me just now, I wouldn't be able to stop him. This thing." Riaz looked at the conch in his hand. "His Majesty spent so much effort just to let me find this useless conch?" Following Lu Ji's example, he had already put the conch to his ear to listen. Indeed, he could only hear the sound of the wind. "Riaz, why don't you try to blow this conch?" Helen suddenly said. "You mean blow it?" Riaz was startled and subconsciously looked at the end of the conch. Helen nodded vigorously at this moment. Riaz didn't hesitate. At this point, he naturally had to try any method. He put the end of the conch into his mouth, then took a deep breath and blew it out forcefully. Whoa! A low sound followed, but there was nothing special about the sound of the conch blown by the horn. The only thing that was slightly special was that the sound of the horn seemed to be able to travel very far. The 3 of them waited for a moment and stared at the surroundings, but there was no change for a long time. Discouraged, Riaz put down the conch and smiled bitterly. "Well, it's a pity that this conch is empty. Otherwise, we can try to see if it can be cooked and eaten." After a slightly cold joke, Riaz awkwardly looked at the 2 pairs of eyes in front of him. When he was about to speak, his nose suddenly twitched, and then he suddenly looked at a certain direction in the forest. This immediately startled Lu Gu and Helen at the same time. Lu Gu was quick-witted and quickly picked up a withered branch from the ground. Who knew if it would work? "Don't be afraid, it's not Mr. Konghai." At this moment, Riaz's face was filled with joy. He had already smelled a familiar scent. While Lu Gu was puzzled, several figures instantly rushed out from the towering shrubs in front of them. At the same time, there was a pleasantly surprised cry. "Riaz!" The moment the voice sounded, a figure quickly rushed up and directly hugged Riaz in her arms. It was a proud and mature woman. The little siren instantly opened her eyes wide, but she suddenly heard Lu Gu say in her ear, "Don't worry, this is his mother. She's not a threat to you, or should I say, she's the biggest threat to you?" Woo! This sound seemed to have a life of its own. It didn't disperse immediately, but went far away. The sound kept moving forward in the dim metal corridor. It penetrated one door after another, and then penetrated into a huge room filled with blue light. There were large and small pools emitting faint light in the room. Finally, the sound moved to the top of one of the pools and finally penetrated into the pool water. All of a sudden, something opened its eyes in the pool. Strange, why is it so easy this time? Along the way, King Mojito had told them more than once about the dangers of this place, especially about the red-black guys who were as tall as him. Whenever he talked about them, his face would turn solemn. Those red-black guys didn't show up. Long Gang ignored him and asked directly, "Do you think Lewis's legacy, has it arrived?" "It's almost here," King Mojito said quickly. "Without those red-black guys blocking the way, the speed is much faster this time." They were walking in the middle of a long metal corridor. Suddenly, King Mojito had his men stop. He twitched his nose and then quickly climbed up the wall. At the ceiling, His Majesty pried open a metal plate with a knife and then climbed in. Soon, Long Gang and Master Karen also climbed into the ceiling, followed by a group of ape warriors. "What's that smell?" Master Karen crawled behind King Mojito. Looking at the red place exposed by the king, he didn't have a good experience. "Of course, it's the mark I left." King Mojito turned around and said, "The road here is very complicated. If I don't leave a mark, it's difficult to find that place. So every time I come here, I'll add another mark. Oh, I should drink more water. There don't seem to be enough marks now." Master Kai Luan's face darkened. He had already guessed how the mark was left behind by the beast. "Okay, we're here." The ventilation duct in front suddenly became open, but in fact, it was not very spacious. It was just a suspicious space that could accommodate a few people. Here, Master Karen saw something attached to the wall that looked like a rescue capsule. Mojito pointed to this thing and said, "This is the legacy I found. Unfortunately, it's connected to these pipes. I was afraid of breaking it, so I could only leave it here. Otherwise, I would have dragged it back to my territory. It's not easy to take the risk to come here every time. Very old guy, do you recognize this thing? It seems that the Emperor has been here." Master Karen's eyes lit up at this time. He walked up and touched the legacy that King Mojito mentioned, smiled and said, "This is a rescue capsule produced in the underwater city. It's a very old model, and has been out of production for at least 60 or 70 years. You can open it?" King Mojito grabbed Master Karen's arm excitedly at this time. "It should be possible. I'll try." After Master Karen checked it, he nodded and said, "It seems that you did the right thing not to take this rescue boat away. There's no magic energy here. It should rely on these lines to obtain energy from the central tower to maintain itself." "I knew it. I'm very smart." King Mojito grinned, revealing a mouthful of snow-white teeth. "It's okay. It's not difficult to open." Master Karen quickly said, "It's a universal password. You can enter it from here. Of course, if you don't know the password, it's difficult to open it." King Mojito could no longer hear what Master Karen said. He just muttered to himself, "Lewis, I can finally see what you left behind." With the opening of the hatch, a white chill slowly came out. The hatch was finally opened to the limit. At the same time, everyone saw the thing placed inside. "What's this?" Master Karen opened his mouth, his face full of surprise. "A bone?" Subconsciously, the master wanted to pick up the bone, but someone was faster than him and took the bone in his hand. "Long Gang, you? This isn't a bone." Long Gang looked at the thing in his hand with a solemn expression. "This is a scale shed by the Sea Goblin King." "Sea Goblin King?" Master Karen frowned and said, "How do you know?" Long Gang didn't reply. He only stared fixedly at this piece of scale. Soon after, his eyes gradually emitted a strange light. As if it was attracted by his gaze, the Sea Demon King's scale in his hand also suddenly flickered. The scales then projected a ray of white light. Then, a beautiful figure appeared in front of everyone. "Queen Mother." Longang's lips moved slightly, and his expression became excited. "Let me guess, who opened this message? Is it my descendant? Oh, by the way, is little Mojito also next to you? Lewis, it's really you, despicable guy. I knew it, I knew it." King Mojito had already shed 2 lines of tears. "I knew it. It's you. I've been waiting for this moment for too long." The word Queen Mother had already made Master Karen curse in his heart. Then, King Mojito's Lewis almost made Master Karen curse. So the Lewis in this beast's mouth was not the same as the undersea city emperor in his understanding? ######PS 4783. Chapter 1724. The woman in the light and shadow belonged to the heroic type. The outline of her face was slightly deep, but no matter how one looked at it, she seemed quite ordinary. Whether it was the identity of the so-called Queen Mother, mentioned by Long Gang, or the identity of the Lewis, mentioned by Mojito, there was no wind, but Master Karen was also in a mess. He could only remain silent, as if he was hiding in a garbage dump, hibernating, and secretly sizing up the young stray dogs and the old dogs who were fighting for food. I think there is a high probability that it will be my descendant. Of course, it may be another sea demon royal family. Who asked my brothers and sisters to compete so fiercely? The woman's voice sounded again in the light and shadow. But at this moment, King Mojito stretched out his hand toward the woman in the light and shadow, but his palm could only pass through. I guess, Mojito, you must be planning to reach out and touch me now? You can't touch me. This is not a physical body, you fool. King Mojito was not angry, but just smirked. This was the person he had waited for most of his life to see again. The scale only records the information she left behind. Long Gang shook his head at this time. She may have imagined our reaction when she left the message, but it's obviously not an interaction. King Mojito did not care, as if he was satisfied to be able to hear such a voice again. Lewis, if you have anything to say, just say it. I'm listening here. I'll listen to you. I'm sorry, Mojito. I lied to you. My name is not Lewis. Lewis is the name of another guy. I just borrowed his name and lived with you for a while. What's the matter? I was quite happy during this period. I don't think I'll forget it in the future. By the way, I'll tell you now. My real name is Iska. I won't forget it either. You despicable guy. King Mojito clenched his teeth, but soon laughed again. Iska, Iska, Iska. Let's go back to my matter. Open the thing I left behind. You have to listen carefully. Woman, Iska's voice sounded again. As I said, you have a high chance of being my descendant, or even the one I'm pregnant with now. Long Gang's expression changed slightly, and he subconsciously looked at Iska in the light and shadow. She lowered her head and smiled, stroking her stomach. I don't know if you can be born. Iska's voice sounded again. She shook her head. Then, the guy who opened my message, how much do you know about the history of the siren race and the underwater city? Master Karen's expression couldn't help but change slightly, and her expression unknowingly became serious. Here is the origin of the Siren clan and the underwater city. The origin I'm talking about is not only before the Heavy Sea Era, but also before the Heavy Sea Era. That's right, the origin of the Lemurian civilization was here. This is a testing ground created by people we can't imagine. As for the Lemurians, in the beginning, they were only created as laborers for the experiment. However, there are no sea demon tribe, nor are there any people from Underwater City. We all look the same. We are called herders here and work for the central tower. An accident opened the door to the test site, and our common ancestors all left this place. That was how the Lemurian civilization came to be. Impossible! Master Karen let out a shocked and angry voice. But in an instant, he was greeted with a heavy punch from King Mojito. The power of the punch instantly made the old man bend over and curl up on the ground in pain. Don't interrupt, Lewis. Iska. I've waited for most of my life. I'll kill you, old man. Long Gang silently helped Master Karen up and shook his head at him. How should I put it? When I first found out about this, it probably took me some time to recover. But in fact, if I think about it carefully, it's not a big deal. Just like how the underwater city cultivated more suitable meat and poultry, the Lemurians were also cultivated by a more advanced civilization. There doesn't seem to be anything wrong with it. Perhaps the one who created the Lemurians was also the one who created them? She looked indifferent, as if she was talking about something that had nothing to do with her, but Long Gang was shocked by this thought. Although the ancestors left this place, they also took the key here with them. Perhaps, when they left, the ancestors thought that one day they would come back again. Or maybe they hoped that this door would not open again. There are 2 keys. After so many years of development, they are kept by 2 people. One of them is the great sage Leeds, one of the 7 great sages of the Lemurian era before the Heavy Sea era. At the same time, he is also the common ancestor of our Siren tribe after the Heavy Sea era. What? The great sage Leeds is actually. Master Karen couldn't help but exclaim. However, King Mojito instantly cast a murderous look, which made Master Karen's face turn pale and quickly shut his mouth. The other one is the ancestor of the current underwater city's royal family, named Lewis. But few people know that the identity of Lewis is also one of the 7 great sages before the Heavy Sea era. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me what the identities of these 2 key holders were. What's important is that the key held by the Siren tribe fell into my hands. Long Gang glanced at Master Karen. This time, the underwater city used him to exchange for the key to the Siren royal court. The key of the Siren clan was actually lost at the very beginning. After the Siren clan and the undersea city broke off, the secret of the key suddenly appeared. It may be that an ancestor who was in charge of the key died in that tragic war before he could pass it on. My key was found when I was bored and studied the remains of my ancestor, the great sage Leeds, and some of the works left behind. So, according to the information left behind by the great sage Leeds, the instructions about land of death, land of reincarnation, I found this place in the deep sea. The legend of Land of Death is actually. Master Karen just started to speak and then closed his mouth. What's interesting is that at the same time I found this place, another guy also found this place. Iska flipped her hair at this time. The guy who came later, I believe you can guess who the other person is. That's right, it's the prince of the underwater city, Prince Yi. This time, Master Karen frowned. Even Long Gang frowned. Whether it was Master Karen or Long Gang, who had been lurking in the underwater city for a while, they had never heard of the so-called prince of the underwater city. Prince Yi, the current emperor of the underwater city, Louis XXXIX, had been in power for more than 100 years. Nearly 200 years, but no one had ever heard of Louis XXXIX leaving behind an heir. The 2 former empresses had also passed away in the past 100 years. Assuming that the time of the test site was the same as the time in the deep sea, according to Mojito and Iska's acquaintance, the time when Iska and Prince Yi entered the test site was also within this 100 years. But there was almost no time left for them to contemplate. Iska in the light and shadow didn't stop what she was going to say. Yi is quite interesting. As the future emperor of the underwater city, he actually studied the works of the ancestors of the Siren tribe, who defected and was also interested in Land of Death. Is it fate? Or is it just a coincidence? A princess of the Siren royal court and a prince of the underwater city, each with the keys of their ancestors, came to the legendary Land of Death, almost at the same time. There is no doubt that we cooperated and opened the door to the Land of Death together, coming to the place where this civilization originated. In the research of the great sage Leeds, he said that the Land of Death is also a land of reincarnation which can let all life start again. In fact, this statement is not wrong. If this place is opened and the things here are released, the civilization outside will indeed lead to destruction. After the world is destroyed, it will usher in a new life, and a new civilization will naturally be born. Naturally, it is a reincarnation. Anyway, this is my understanding. I often quarrel with that guy because of this matter, but every time I can't outtalk him. Don't you think it's annoying? Once I got angry, I simply ignored that guy and ran out, letting him fiddle with the central tower by himself. Later, I met Mojito. Oh, Mojito is quite interesting. At least during that time, he helped me pass a lot of time. Master Karen glanced at His Majesty coldly. Looking at his silly smile at this time, his eyes could not help but have a trace of subtlety. Well, that's more or less my experience in the experimental site. Iska smiled and said, most of it is like this. The rest are some small things that happened because of physiological impulses in a boring life. I believe you won't be interested. Master Kai Luan opened his mouth. He was clearly very interested in the origin of the life within the body of the Queen Mother mentioned by Long Gang, as well as the matter of Prince Yi. But this was just a piece of information from the past. If the light and shadow left by Iska did not say anything, it would be futile no matter how much he desired. Well, write down what I want to say. I hope that as a successor you can remember it. Iska's expression suddenly became serious. Long Gang could not help but become solemn. Remember, if one day I am no longer here, and Undersea City intends to attack the Siren tribe, or even intend to annihilate us, I hope that you will not resist and accept it peacefully. The voice stopped here. What? Long Gang was shocked. He, who had almost lost control of his emotions, rushed forward in an instant, but was also blocked by Mojito at the same time. Get lost! The furious Long Gang stared at the other party. But King Mojito was not afraid at all. I thought you were smarter than this old guy, but it turns out that you are also a fool. Listen, anger will only make you lose control. Long Gang gritted his teeth and said, do you know what she just said? If someone tells you that someone will destroy your kingdom, and then tells you not to resist, to stand there and happily welcome death, you will do it. I will. Mojito said calmly, if she said it and she thinks it is right, I will. Unreasonable. Long Gang bellowed. Unreasonable. Unreasonable. But after a moment of venting, Long Gang calmed down and stared at the scale, but the light on the scale had gradually dissipated, and the light and shadow had disappeared. King Mojito carefully put away the scale and looked at Long Gang expectantly. Can I see Iska again? I am not in the mood. Long Gang shook his head. King Mojito did not speak, but directly put away the scale. He knew that Long Gang must have a way to open the scale again. Long Gang, perhaps instead of being calm, you should tell me your identity now, right? Master Karen frowned at this time. This Iska, who is she? Queen Mother? The Siren tribe's queen? She is indeed the Siren King, and also my Queen Mother. Long Gang shook his head somewhat dejectedly, the previous Siren King. But the Siren royal court once encountered an internal strife. During the internal strife, the Queen Mother was killed by the current Siren King for the crime of betrayal. After that, as a direct descendant of the Queen Mother, I was isolated. Looking at Master Karen, Long Gang sighed and said, at that time, the current Siren King found me and told me to sneak into the Undersea City to find a way to deal with the Undersea City Emperor. If I can gain something in this operation, it will clear the Queen Mother's name and restore the identity of my tribe. Master Karen was not very excited, perhaps because he had some doubts about Long Gang's identity. He was silent for a while, then frowned and said, so, the child who hasn't been born yet is you? Iska was pregnant here. Your father is Prince Yi? Long Gang opened his mouth and shook his head. I don't know, this part of the time is very vague, it might not be me. How many children does your Queen Mother have? Master Karen asked step by step. 2. I still have Kaya. Obviously, you have a greater chance. Master Karen said in a deep voice. And you are a mixed breed. Has your Queen Mother ever mentioned your biological father to you? Long Gang shook his head. She didn't mention it, and there is no need to mention it. When the Siren clan gives birth to offspring, they never pay attention to the parent. Although the royal court pays attention to it to preserve the bloodline, they will only treat the father and mother well at most, because they are just tools for giving birth. I know who my Queen Mother is, but I don't know who my father is. Just like other royal families, they know who their father is, but they don't know who their mother is. What a barbaric rule! Master Karen sneered. But this way, I am even more certain that you are Iska and Prince Ye's child. Long Gang's face turned pale. The undersea city officials never had any record of Prince Yi, so where did Prince Yi come from? Unless Iska lied in the message, or, from the beginning, the person who entered here with Iska and held the other key lied. Who was lying? Hashtag, 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 hashtag. Chapter 1725. King Mojito ordered his ape warriors to dismantle the escape pod where the scales were placed and move them out. In the past, he was afraid that he would damage the things inside after taking away the escape pod. Now that he had obtained the scales left by Iska, he naturally didn't have too many misgivings. Long Gang was very silent. Master Karen's conjecture made him fall into deep doubt. Later on, he didn't hide his past from Master Karen. As the descendant of the previous Sea Goblin King, Long Gang had been imprisoned since he was young because of the struggle between the two Sea Goblin Kings. His days weren't very good. He went undercover in Underwater City only to restore his identity and wash away the crime of the previous Sea Goblin King, Iska. Crime, betrayal. How could the dignified Sea Goblin King have such a terrible crime of betrayal? But what if Iska really had a child with the Prince of Underwater City? Both sides already had an unresolvable enmity. Even if it was the Sea Goblin King, if this kind of news spread, it wouldn't be able to suppress the fury of the entire Sea Goblin royal court, right? Even to the extent that the current Sea Goblin King deliberately trained you when you were young, and finally sent you to Underwater City as a spy. The reason given to you was to let you wash away the crime on your body through this operation. But what about in private? Master Karen said slowly with his hoarse voice. It may know who you are, but it didn't tell you anything. It made you come to Underwater City. It made you go against the government of Underwater City, and it made you kill each other. The Sea Goblin King is also a vicious guy, but he's so shrewd. He's also made to be an emperor. His heart is really ruthless. Enough, Master. This is just your wishful thinking. Long Gang said in a deep voice. There is no evidence to prove this. Indeed, I don't. Master Karen said indifferently. But even if there isn't, you have already begun to think so in your heart and even believe in this direction, right? There is no Prince Yi in Underwater City. You and I both know about this. Master Karen frowned. Indeed, there's nothing about Prince Yi. But don't forget that the royal government can manipulate the memories of the people. Every time there's violence, every time there's a carnival, there will always be many people who mysteriously disappear, and everyone will forget about them. Isn't it because we noticed this that we established destiny, and worked hard to liberate the people of Underwater City from the Emperor's reign of terror? What do you mean? Long Gang also frowned. Master Karen said calmly, since someone from the Sea Demon Royal Court knew about the matter between Iska and Prince Yi, and thus seized the opportunity to overthrow Iska's throne, successfully seizing power, then why is it that the Undersea City's royal government doesn't know about this matter? Perhaps Prince Yi really did exist, but we have all forgotten about this matter. Besides, Louis XXXIX has been on the throne for nearly 200 years. There have been 2 empresses, but he has never left behind a child. This is already a very strange matter. You mean, I'm just guessing? Master Karen shook his head. And these guesses are of no help to our current situation. Mojito has found what he wanted to find, but it's obviously not what we need. You should face up to one thing. We still can't leave here. I want to calm down. Long Gang sighed. You really should calm down. Master Karen patted Long Gang's shoulder. Then, he walked toward the ape warriors who were dismantling the escape capsule. How long are you going to take to dismantle it like this? Let me do it. You still have to find an old guy like me for this kind of old-fashioned thing. King Mojito couldn't hear the sarcasm in his words at all. Hearing this, He even let the ape warriors retreat to the side with some joy. "Old guy, when we go back, I'll reward you with a few strong female apes." The corner of the master's eyes couldn't help but twitch. He squatted down without saying a word and began to dismantle the escape capsule. Just as the ape warriors couldn't understand, King Mojito was touching the scales in his hand like it was a treasure, and Long Gang was distracted. Master Karen suddenly pressed a button on the side of the escape capsule. Then, a box suddenly popped out. Master Karen quickly glanced at it, put the things in the box into his sleeve, and then pressed the box back. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. Soon, Master Karen stood up and clapped her hand. "All right, you can move it now. This thing can still be used. I'll help you fix it when we go back. I, Mojito, will give you 2 more female apes." Master Karen shook his head and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "No need, as long as you can give me something to eat. King Mojito, I'm afraid the 2 of us can't leave in a short time, let alone help you leave here. For the time being, we can only stay in your territory. Please take care of us in the future. As long as he's willing to release Iska and listen to me, you can stay as long as you want." King Mojito thumped his chest and agreed. But at this moment, a slight tremor came from all around, and this tremor gradually became stronger. "What's going on?" Master Karen's face changed slightly. "This place seems to be collapsing. Leave here immediately." All the hair on King Mojito's body stood on end. "Something terrifying has appeared. Decades ago, I defeated the most powerful beast, but it didn't give me this feeling. Go, go." And Long Gang's heart was beating inexplicably. He also vaguely felt a terrifying aura. In the dense tropical rainforest, Mrs. Kaya was gently stroking Riaz's head, always smiling, listening to Riaz's experiences during this period, including his encounter with Helen. How could a child deceive their parents? Parents were the same. "So you're from Undersea City?" Lyoga suddenly whispered into Helen's ear. She had only just learned about this from Riaz's narration to Madame Kaya. Helen glanced at Lyoga with some fear, then nodded silently. "Don't be afraid, I don't have much prejudice against foreign species," Lyoga said indifferently. Louis was planning to marry a woman from the ground. Helen asked timidly, "You always mention Louis's name. Is he the most important person to you? Is he your favorite person?" "Although I don't reject foreign species, I'm more curious about the physiological structure of foreign species." Lyoga smiled and said, "If you don't mind, when there's a chance, let me cut a few times to see what's inside your body." This immediately made the little siren's face turn pale, and she unconsciously took a few steps back. "Lady Lyoga, this looks like a little girl who doesn't know anything. There's no need to scare her," Mrs. Kaya said indifferently. Lyoga shrugged and smiled. "She might be the one to steal your son away. You're helping her so soon." "Lady Lyoga must be joking," Mrs. Kaya said indifferently. "He's my child. Naturally, he won't be stolen by anyone. However, if the child grows up and wants to leave, as a parent, I won't stop him." It seemed to be a little tit for tat. The warriors of Underwater City were in a very difficult situation. Madame Kaya was their direct superior, but the Silver Moon which was even more so their superior. They could only stare blankly and pretend that they saw nothing, and then focus on monitoring their surroundings. "Lady Lyoga, let's talk over there. It's just me and you," Mrs. Kaya suddenly said. "Then let's go." Lyoga took a step forward and walked behind a large tree. Mrs. Kaya patted Riaz's cheek and gave him a reassuring look before quickly walking behind the tree as well. "What do you want to say?" The girl leaned against the tree trunk with her arms crossed. It was not big. Mrs. Kaya was silent for a while before frowning. "Where is my husband?" Lyoga said casually. "Didn't I tell you that your husband's negligence led to a major incident in Astral 6? Many outstanding researchers from the kingdom lost their lives, and he's now locked up in Undersea City's prison. Do your job well for the kingdom and make up for your mistakes. When the time comes, you'll see your husband. Madame Kaya continued to stare at Lu Gu closely. Suddenly, she lowered her voice and said, "Before I met up with you, I had always been moving with Karen and Longgang, and I've learnt a few things from Longgang." "Tell me about it." Lyoga raised an eyebrow. Mrs. Kaya said in a low voice, "I want to see my husband." "Are you trying to negotiate with me?" Lyoga sneered. "Have you forgotten who I am?" "I know who you are, the shadow by the Emperor's side." Mrs. Kaya narrowed her eyes. "But here, I'm the strongest. Riaz has already told me that your power has been taken away. You're just a normal person now." "This damned brat." The girl cursed in her heart, but there was no fear on her face. She even laughed coldly. "Even if I'm just a normal person, I've probably killed dozens of times more people than you. You might not have any power, but there are some techniques that can be used without any power. You probably can't take it away. Besides, why don't you try and see if I can command your subordinates if you attack me here?" "After we return," Mrs. Kaya said coldly. "I want to see my husband. Then I'll tell you about Longgang." "Do as you wish," Lyoga said indifferently. "I don't want to hear it if it's not something important." Mrs. Kaya did not say anything and left. The moment she returned to Riaz's side, she returned to her gentle motherly self. "Riaz, is the key still on you?" Riaz shook his head. "No, I was already here when I woke up. It's probably still on the door outside." "Were you the only one here when you woke up?" Mrs. Kaya suddenly asked. "And Helen?" Riaz shook his head again. "But Helen only woke up after me. There's also brother Luo and big sister. There's also brother Luo and big sister. They should have woken up before me." "Are you talking about the two people who studied with you in the Tiantian courtyard?" Mrs. Kaya could not help but frown. Riaz nodded, but he thought, if Mother still remembers brother Luo and big sister, doesn't that mean only Helen has forgotten about them? "Where are they?" "They're gone." Riaz shook his head. "I don't know where they are right now. They suddenly vanished right in front of me." "Mother, are you suspecting that brother Luo has taken the key?" "You don't know what they did before you woke up," Mrs. Kaya said indifferently. Madame Kaya said indifferently, "I don't know either, but there's always a possibility. Remember, even your closest kin can be deceived, let alone ordinary friends." "But brother Luo and the others don't seem to have any reason to do that," Riaz said instinctively. "Mother, brother Luo and the others are my friends. They even helped me participate in the flying serpent competition." There was also no evidence to prove this. It was only his intuition. "Enough, Riaz." Mrs. Kaya placed her hands on her son's shoulders and said softly, "Mother didn't want you to suspect your friends. On the contrary, Mother is happy that you were able to make friends. Do you know? All these years, both Mother and Father have been busy with work and haven't been able to take good care of you. I know that you were very lonely when you were young, and you didn't have many friends after you grew up. However, true friends won't suddenly disappear right in front of you. Perhaps they have some special reason. I hope so. I also hope that they're good people." Mrs. Kaya smiled. As a mother, she clearly did not plan on using a commanding tone in front of her child. "All right. Even if we don't have the key, there will be a way to leave." At this moment, a cry of surprise rang out. It was Helen. After the cry of surprise, Helen fell to the ground. She even hugged her own body and began to tremble. Her face was abnormally pale. "What happened?" Lyoga was the first to walk to Helen's side and asked with a frown. Something terrifying. It's coming. Helen's voice began to tremble. It's coming. Something terrifying? Lyoga subconsciously frowned. Could it be Mr. Konghai? Riaz suddenly shivered. Not him. It's something else, it's coming. Let's go. It's coming. Helen cried out again. At this moment, along with Helen's cry of surprise, the entire rainforest began to violently tremble. Riaz's expression changed slightly, because at this moment, he also smelled a terrifying smell. What happened? Central Tower, Laboratory Number 1. Feeling the slight tremors from the floor, Miss Maid suddenly looked at the Central Tower's host. At this moment, a beautiful black flaming butterfly was dancing gracefully in the air, and dancing together with this black flaming butterfly was a ladybug the size of a fist. In other words, the ladybug was being chased by the butterfly. The source code of the Central Tower's host was madly generating all kinds of vicious curses. But after hearing Miss Maid's question, Ladybug, host, quickly said, "It's nothing. It's just an experimental subject that woke up." An experimental body woke up? Miss Maid frowned prettily. Immediately, Miss Maid looked at the pure black force field. A figure slowly walked out of the force field. It was indeed Luaccio. "Master," Miss Maid called softly and instantly put the topic of the host behind her. "What's so important about that?" Boss Luo smiled. He was holding a pile of stones in his hands and walked back easily. "Did you wait long?" "I didn't go in for long." "Not long," Miss Maid said softly, "but I don't want there to be a next time. As your maid, I should always be by your side." "Give me a box." Boss Luo smiled. Miss Maid turned her hand and a gorgeous box appeared instantly. Luaccio carefully put the stones in his hands into the box and put it away. "These are something to keep as a souvenir." Boss Luo didn't elaborate. Instead, he looked at a ladybug that was frantically avoiding the black flame butterfly in the air and blinked curiously. "Then, what happened to it?" "No," Miss Maid said casually, "maybe it felt bored." The Central Tower's host once again generated countless fragrant language codes in its core. Boss Luo smiled casually, then felt the vibration from the floor and suddenly said, "It seems that I didn't go in for long. I came out at the right time. Hashtag 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 PS1. Thank you to the cute author of Student Who Is So Cute for serving tea to capitalism. PS2. Thank you again to the cute author of Student Who Is So Cute. Because of you, because my surname is also Who. Someone once called me Student Who. PS3. 48/83 plus 1 is equal to 84, PS4. I feel that I can outrun the denominator. End of this chapter. Chapter 1726. Boss Luo said that he came out at the right time, but the Central Tower's host didn't think so at all. It was too late. How long had this black flame butterfly been bullying the Central Tower of the test site, been bullied by this black flame butterfly? It was just a projection being chased. Even if it was burned, the Central Tower's host wouldn't suffer any actual damage. But because it was an intelligence that was close to a complete soul, it was about to step into the stage of an intelligent life. It was afraid of death. Well, it didn't like to die. Of course, on the other hand, it was also silently recording the various changes in its source code at this time. Obviously, it was threatened, and even as the weaker party, this kind of situation had never happened before. So in this contradiction, the Central Tower's host began to refresh its data rapidly. In short, although it was abused to some extent, it was also happy. However, the black flame butterfly stopped chasing at this moment, and slowly flew back to Miss Maid's shoulder, and then disappeared. The Central Tower's host was quite disappointed. It felt that its evolution seemed to have slowed down suddenly, but at the same time, it was also aware that Luaccio had discovered something after coming out of the pure black force field, so it put most of its energy on this side. However, as the Central Tower's host, it was obviously able to handle all the things that happened in the Central Tower at this time. "Is there anything left in the force field?" the Central Tower's host asked directly at this time, and at the same time, it began to deal with the awakening of a sealed experimental subject. "Stop your other actions first," Boss Luo suddenly said without any head or tail. The host, which had transformed into a ladybug, could only rely on the sudden pause at this time to express its doubts. I mean, temporarily stop the recovery of this awakened experimental subject. Luocchio added more confidently. How do you know? The host fell into deeper doubts. Although it had voluntarily been forced to open the authority to the other party didn't use the authority to snoop on everything that happened in the central tower at this time. Moreover, he had just walked out of the pure black force field that isolated everything. Don't you want to stop? Luocchio said indifferently. The central tower could only helplessly say, You have the authority to ask me to do this. However, I don't recommend it. This test subject is relatively unstable, so when the test subjects were released, they were excluded from the list. If it continues to move, it may cause some irreparable damage to the central tower. It won't come here. Luocchio smiled and said, He won't threaten your existence. I have other uses for this experimental body. When it has done what it wants to do, you can retrieve it. Other functions? Luocchio said lightly. This is also one of the reasons why I went directly to the mainframe room. As for the pure black force field, it's an unexpected gain. It doesn't matter if we temporarily stop the recall of the experimental subject. The central tower's host said directly, I hope to know what happened to you in the space inside the force field. This may allow me to find out the reason for the accident in the experiment with experimental subject number 00. Let me tell you the reason, Luocchio suddenly said. What is the reason? The central tower's host's voice rose and fell, revealing a hint of excitement. Luocchio said slowly, The reason for the accident in the experiment is that the experimental subject itself wishes for an accident to happen. This logic doesn't hold, the central tower's host said with a hint of surprise. Everything is under control. My monitoring is very tight, and I haven't given it any chance to create any accident. Boss Luo shook his head and said, No, it can do it, because that's an ability close to fate. Although I'm not very clear on what reason your creator had for choosing to conduct this experiment in secret, I don't know. But perhaps even Cicero himself didn't think of this. Fate's ability. Fate's ability? The central tower's host's voice was slightly deeper. Fate is control. I control everything in the experiment field, which is equivalent to me controlling the fate. Here. You mean experimental subject number 00, controls me? It doesn't control you. Boss Luo thought for a while and said, It just let fate affect everything here. I just said that it's an ability close to fate. I didn't say that this is fate itself. I don't understand. There's not enough data about fate. You want to know? Luocchio said suddenly. The central tower's host instantly gave an affirmative answer. Boss Luo blinked and said softly, Don't worry, you'll know. The central tower's host immediately generated all kinds of fragrant words in the code. From the beginning, it had already entered the data of this man and woman into the database for analysis, but it didn't analyze anything. But at this moment, it felt something strange from Boss Luo's words. That was, this guy before entering the pure black force field, and after coming out now, seemed to be, well, a little more lively. Naughty. Oh right. Luocchio smiled and said, You look quite cute now. Insects are a kind of creature with a particularly tenacious vitality, maybe they'll be quite suitable for you. Oh, is that so? The central tower's host was stunned again, then it secretly denied. How could insects be suitable for it? It just felt that its evolution was not complete, so it temporarily changed its appearance at the suggestion of Miss Maid to better hide the emotional fluctuations that it could not handle well. In the default setting of the central tower, when it completed the evolution of life, it should at least have a strong body with a completely composite mechanical perspective. There were so many mutants in the experimental site as a reference, so it should be able to design a strong body that met its own requirement. So, you don't have any information about experimental subject number 00, right? The Central Tower's host said with some disappointment. It seems that I need more time to recover it. Miss Maid suddenly asked curiously, this experimental subject has escaped for so long, and you only plan to recover it now? On the one hand, it's because the experimental site was closed. The Central Tower's host said unhurriedly. On the other hand, my evolution is at a critical moment. Most importantly, the world is so big, I want to go out and see after I have a body. Unexpectedly, it was a host computer with a poetic dream. Soon, it won't take long. Luochu smiled and said, I hope you'll like the outside world. Feel everything from the perspective of a complete life. Even as a ladybug, there was a sense of expectation in its eyes. Become a complete life. It seemed to have fallen into a certain state. Luochu glanced at it and decided to ignore it for the time being. The Central Tower's host gave him permission. At this time, Boss Luo directly used this permission to open the surveillance in the Central Tower. These operations were just the subroutines of the host, and it shouldn't be distracted at this time. Guess what else Lewis has prepared for Riaz? Boss Luo suddenly looked at Yu Yi and smiled. Miss Maid wasn't at the scene of the transaction between the Master and the Undersea City Emperor. It was actually the transaction between Boss Luo II and the Undersea City Emperor. She hadn't seen the content of the contract yet, so she couldn't know all the details at this time. But this didn't prevent Miss Maid from playing this little game of speculation with the Master. So Miss Maid turned her eyes and said, Angry? Boss Luo smiled slightly. You'll know soon. The Master became cheerful. Miss Maid suddenly thought. Something terrible. Little Siren's frightened look could infect everyone present. They couldn't help but feel a vague sense of fear because of Helen's panic at this time. And soon, this fear became a reality. First, a huge shadow covered the sky above the tropical jungle at this time. Then, a huge blue light was projected from the shadow. Above their heads, a blue figure was slowly descending at this time. Dark blue, skin the color of the sea. The figure that descended at this moment didn't have any hair on its body. It didn't even have the characteristics of a man or a woman. It had a perfect body structure and distinct facial features. But it was nearly 3 meters tall. Everyone, be careful. Madame Kaya waved her hand. Several soldiers of the Undersea City instantly raised their weapons and were fully alert, but in the next moment, their weapons suddenly flew out of their hands. These sturdy guns were crazily twisted at this time and finally crumpled into a ball, then fell to the ground. Then, this blue giant finally landed on the ground. A drop of cold sweat appeared on Lyoga's forehead. Her current state was actually the worst. Not to mention Kong Hai, even if she fought with Riaz, she might not be able to win. Now, there was a blue giant. At this moment, while everyone was sizing up this blue giant, it was also sizing up everyone. Its gaze swept through everyone present and finally stopped at Riaz. Madame Kaya immediately raised her hand to block it. This was an instinctive reaction to protect her child. However, it was exactly because of her actions that she was sent flying all of a sudden. She smashed into the side and immediately cracked the trunk of a huge tree. Mother! Riaz was both shocked and furious. The blood in his body began to boil. An unprecedented anger drove his entire body. You dare hit my mother! Riaz's legs kicked. The ground instantly shattered as his body shot out like a bullet. Did he become stronger again? Lyoga was stunned. Even though she had always looked down on Riaz's weakness, she had never really treated him as trash. How long had it been since the flying serpent competition? Not long, but Riaz had already activated the power of his blue blood. Even for her, it had taken her a long time to activate the power of her blue blood. However, even though Riaz's blue blood power increased quickly, it was not to an unbelievable degree. The current Riaz was still very weak in her eyes. At most, he had turned from an ant into a powerful ant. not to mention the difference between Riaz fully awakened, and the difference between Riaz's power before her power was taken away and activated to the limit was like heaven and earth. As expected, Riaz's aura was very fierce, but the moment he rushed in front of this blue giant, the giant easily grabbed Riaz's fist. After grabbing the fist, it casually swung it and smashed Riaz's entire body to the ground, as if he was hit by dozens of flying serpents at high speed. Riaz felt like his spine was about to shatter. His brain was shaken and he instantly spat out a mouthful of blood. After being smashed, he completely lost the ability to move. The conch on his body also rolled out because of this. At this moment, the blue giant actually bent down and picked up the conch on the ground. Then, it did something that surprised everyone. It actually put the conch next to its ear and listened. This terrifying blue giant had actually come for this conch. In an instant, Lyoga had this realization in her heart. Lewis had left this conch behind to attract the blue giant's appearance? Riaz spat out another mouthful of blood. He struggled a few times, but he was unable to get up. He could only stare at the blue giant. However, the blue giant was abnormally quiet right now. It even closed its eyes and sat on the ground, listening to the conch's sound just like that. Lyoga suddenly gave a signal with her eyes. A few soldiers of the underwater city quickly ran out in fear and carried Riaz back. At the same time, they also brought the heavily injured Madame Kaya back from the other side. Due to Riaz's powerful regenerative physique, he was still heavily injured, but he was able to catch his breath. However, Madame Kaya's condition was clearly much worse. She had directly fainted. "Let's go," Lyoga said decisively. "This giant's attention seems to be drawn to the conch right now. You can't deal with it right now." Riaz nodded silently. Then, he personally carried Madame Kaya on his back. Feeling his mother's weak heartbeat on his back, Riaz coldly glanced at the motionless blue giant. This was the first time in his life that he wanted to use violence to destroy a life so much. Bam! A loud sound suddenly rang out. A long line of dust rolled into the sky. At the same time, a crack that was dozens of meters tall appeared on the wall at the edge of the tropical forest. Then, a figure slowly walked out from the long line of dust. Konghai. At the center of his palm, there was a flash of lightning. "Found you. Hashtag 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 PS. I'm not feeling well. I'm not as usual." Chapter 1727. I didn't arrange this. The Central Tower's mainframe suddenly said. He did it because of his previous orders, not to deal with this awakened experimental subject. In fact, if it was to capture the special experimental subject, I would have sent out the glorious Sun-level Vanguard. So, if you need it, I can order it to leave. It was obviously talking about Kong Hai's appearance in the tropical jungle test site of the Central Tower. No need, it's fine as it is. Boss Lua looked at the image on the light screen and smiled. Let's talk about the glorious Sun-level Vanguard? This seems to be a division of the Eternal Kingdom? How do you know? The Central Tower's mainframe couldn't help but ask curiously. But it quickly recalled that Luocio had previously said something like, he would always know. It appeared on its own. As expected, Boss Luo still responded in this way. I don't have a way for now. The Central Tower's host could only say, generally, it's divided into the Common Tier, followed by the Dawn Tier, the Radiant Moon Tier, and the Glorious Sun Tier, followed by the Eternal Tier that surpasses the Glorious Sun Tier in all aspects. Basically, this division is applicable to all military product. Miss Maid suddenly said, so, the highest grade you have here is the so-called glorious Sun-level military product. The so-called Vanguard? The Central Tower's mainframe seemed to have regained some of its confidence. The glorious Sun level is already the highest grade that citizens are allowed to use other than the Eternal Royal Family. Especially the glorious Sun level for combat, it can at least achieve the combat power of a planet's extinction. Miss Maid was slightly moved. The extinction of a planet is only the lowest level of the glorious Sun level? Of course. The central tower's mainframe regains some of its confidence again. The highest level can even achieve the level of crushing a standard star. That's indeed an impressive combat power. For the first time, Miss Maid didn't underestimate it. The central tower's mainframe seemed to be excited, and its voice carried some pride. As for the eternal grade, it can even achieve the level of completely erasing the target from the timeline. Remember, it's not just the time of a single world, but the time of all time and space. Even Miss Maid was completely moved at this moment. She couldn't achieve the impact of the entire timeline. This was an ability that only a shop owner should have. How many glorious Sun-class vanguards are there in the central tower? Boss Luo suddenly asked. 1. The central tower's host said calmly, only my former creator, as a prince of the empire, has the authority to equip glorious Sun-class vanguards in his private testing grounds. What is Mr. Konghai's level? The servant girl asked. Dawn rank. The central tower's main host said directly. If it hadn't been damaged, this bio-soldier would have had the combat strength of a Dawn tier, and it would have been an elite even among Dawn tiers. You said it was damaged? Miss Maid frowned. The central tower's host thought about it and said, back then, when the descendants of the two shepherds escaped from the experimental site, when the door was opened, I only had time to send out this Dawn-class bio-soldier. What do you call it, Konghai? That was his name after that, Boss Luo said casually. He said that he had forgotten many things. That's right. The central tower's main host said calmly. This time, it returned to the testing grounds and connected to me through the internal network. I've discovered that its memory system has been severely damaged, and its combat ability has dropped drastically. However, after reading its data, I've discovered that there's another type of plug-in in its body that can help optimize it. It's also repaired its memory to a certain extent, allowing it to recover some of its combat ability. Right now, it's probably between common and Dawn grade. So, Mr. Konghai lost his memory after leaving the testing grounds after a fierce battle. Boss Luo muttered. When he left the testing grounds, Mr. Konghai was in his best condition, Dawn tier. Then, the one that attacked Mr. Konghai had to be at least Dawn tier. The central tower's mainframe didn't seem to mind. It's just a Dawn-grade bio-soldier. Prince Cicero left behind a production line here. With the materials we have in stock, we can still make 398 more. Miss Maid didn't say anything this time. The foundation of Eternal Kingdom was much deeper than she had imagined. According to the Central Tower's main host, Eternal Tier bio-soldiers could even control the entire timeline. If she was evaluated in Eternal Kingdom's system, she was still at Glorious Sun Tier when she was at her peak. As expected, the primordial that those fellows in the dimensional crevice have been searching for is Eternal Kingdom? Miss Maid said in a low voice. A world that is far beyond the progress of all primordial civilizations, reaching eternity or close to it. The primordial isn't that simple, Boss Luo said suddenly. Miss Maid couldn't help but move her lips. But Boss Luo just shook his head and said, Eternal Kingdom is just the door before the primordial. However, to you and me, to a certain extent, we are already in the primordial. Looking at the moved Miss Maid, Boss Luo said faintly, I'm talking about the things I lost, that were imprisoned. The freedom he sold to the previous owner, the freedom of the soul. Master. She seemed to have something to say. Boss Luo shook his head gently. Let's end this topic. We don't have to dwell on it. After this, I've finally confirmed one thing. The Central Tower's main host was completely blocked, as if the time here had been suddenly taken out of the timeline. There was no front or back. Boss Luo looked at Mississippi Maid with a complicated look. He said softly, as long as the source exists, it turns out that everything can be a toy for me. It's the toy they gave me. Who are they? The question came from the bottom of her heart. She almost blurted it out at this moment, but there was a silent force that melted all the doubts. Following that, Miss Maid actually felt a strong sense of joy. It was a pure thing called love. It was tenderly encircling its master. In an instant, the time that was taken away came back. It returned to the place where it was originally broken, connecting the front and the back, making everything flow again. Remember the words just now in the depth of your memory and then forget it. Boss Luo suddenly smiled. Otherwise, if others hear it, I'll feel like I'm asking for a beating. Miss Maid was stunned. Luochio in the past would never speak in such a tone. Sure enough, since the pure black force field came out, the master really became more cheerful. Actually, I was like this before. Luochio smiled. A few years ago. At that time, he was just a high school student. His father was still a well-loved police officer, and he was surrounded by elders who were very kind to him. They were all people who loved him deeply. That's great. Yu Yi murmured softly. Of course, sometimes I'll be naughty and mischievous. Boss Luo smiled. There will always be times when I'm naughty. Do you like it? She had already answered with a beautiful smile. Boss Luo slowly exhaled. This was the gift he received from the pure black force field from the Emperor Califar. Looking at the two who were staring at each other, the central tower host of the ladybug was floating in boredom. It was making an infinity circle between the two. Therefore, Boss Luo suddenly stretched out his finger and flicked the ladybug's body. The ladybug immediately crashed into the light screen used for observation in front, and then directly penetrated through it. On the light screen, there was only a ripple. At this moment, Riaz's face was distorted. There was a wolf in front and a tiger behind. This was probably referring to Riaz's group. The terrifying blue giant had not been dealt with, and the troublesome Mr. Kong Hai had already caught up with them. I heard that before the sunken sea era, an astronomer discovered a star in the sky that represented Broom. A star that brings bad luck. Tell me, are you born from this star? Facing Lyoga's complaints, Riaz didn't even have the strength to argue with her. If I'm the jinx, then there must be another jinx who will be born as you, okay? You've improved. The young girl Lyoga suddenly smiled. Riaz, I've decided to give you your graduation homework. Go beat this guy to the ground. He really wanted to say something unlucky like, so many people died, why didn't I die? But obviously, this was not the time, because Mr. Kong Hai was approaching. Riaz had a feeling that all his escape routes had been sealed. At this moment, no matter which direction he went, he would inevitably be attacked by the electric arcs in Mr. Kong Hai's palm. We meet again, Mr. Kong Hai. The environment here is not bad. Are you here for a walk? Riaz, your vitality magnetic field has strengthened, Mr. Kukai suddenly said. What? Riaz could not help but be startled. Mr. Kong Hai looked at Lyoga and said indifferently, your life force field has weakened a lot. It seems the neutralization has completely taken effect. Lyoga only narrowed her eyes, but her small fists quietly clenched tightly, until they turned white. At this moment, Mr. Kong Hai's figure flashed and appeared in front of Lyoga. This time, she could not react at all. She saw Mr. Kong Hai's fist swinging towards her forehead. After this punch would probably be an extremely bloody scene. Lyoga's eyes only widened a little. She wanted to move, but her reflexes had become extremely slow. After her bloodline was neutralized, she had completely declined to a life form that was only slightly stronger. However, an enormous force pulled her to the side. When she reacted, all she saw was Riaz holding his hands in front of his body as he slid backwards, a distance of more than 10 meters. He had successfully blocked Mr. Kong Hai's attack. I was saved by this guy again? Lyoga subconsciously frowned. At this moment, Mr. Kong Hai's face showed a hint of surprise as Riaz blocked his attack. If that's the case, then let's withdraw first, Riaz. After saying that, Mr. Kong Hai rushed forward once again, this time even faster. When Riaz was in school, he did not know how to fight. At most, he only knew how to wave his fists randomly. This week, he had been trained by Lyoga quite fiercely, but he still did not have much combat experience. But the opponent he was facing was a specially developed, Dawn class bio-soldier. The result of resisting was instant failure. The moment he failed, Riaz's blood began to boil again, as if something was about to emerge from his forehead. Mr. Kong Hai, who was holding Riaz down with one hand, calmly stretched out his other hand. At the tip of his finger, a long needle had already appeared. At this moment, an ear-piercing sound rang out. It was actually a sharp cry that shook people's hearts. That sound even turned into a visible sound wave that directly rushed towards Mr. Kong Hai, but this sound wave attack did not seem to cause any harm to Mr. Kong Hai. He only looked at the source of the sound wave, Helen, who was currently filled with fear and excitement. My target is only the herdsman and the herdsman's descendants, not you. Mr. Kong Hai said indifferently, please stop your actions, or else I will automatically defend myself. In fact, I now also feel that violence is not the way to solve problems. Withdraw, withdraw, withdraw. What did I do? What did the herdsman do wrong to make you hold on to us and not let us go? Riaz was filled with grief and indignation. What right do you have to decide our fate like this? This is only an order, Mr. Kong Hai said casually. Then, the long needle with the syringe instantly pierced into Riaz's neck. At this moment, Lyoga unexpectedly fell to the ground, unlike her usual self. It was as if Riaz's neutralization was far more serious than her own neutralized power. Ah! Riaz screamed. He had seen the scene of Lyoga being injected by Mr. Kong Hai personally. He had seen a violent woman like Lyoga who was in so much pain that she wanted to die. This was completely a reaction of the body. However, gradually, Riaz found that something was wrong. Pain. It was indeed very painful. Anyone who had a needle in their neck would feel very painful, but it seemed that it was only a stinging pain, and was completely incomparable to Lyoga's pain that she wanted to die. Mr. Kong Hai also showed a rather strange expression at this moment. Riaz gritted his teeth, took the opportunity to exert his strength and escaped. His strength was not weak, and he immediately pushed Mr. Kong Hai away. However, Mr. Kong Hai quickly found his balance and landed on the ground. What happened? Your power was not neutralized? Lyoga looked at Riaz in disbelief, and her mouth was wide open in surprise. It seems that there is nothing wrong. Riaz subconsciously clenched his fist. I feel quite good. Ha ha. Lyoga laughed and said with a big laugh, I didn't expect you to be immune to that guy's injection. It's really, really great. No. Mr. Kong Hai shook his head at this moment. He didn't have an immune neutralization potion. It didn't work because my potion was suddenly stuck and didn't shoot out. Riaz was stunned. Lyoga was also stunned. Then, her face darkened. This guy named Mr. Kong Hai, who invited this idiot? You fragrant, fragrant, fragrant doghead, fragrant. Are you kidding my doghead? Hashtag PS1. Let's complain about this motherf asterisk curs server. It took a few browsers to load and upload to the background. PS2. Next chapter as usual.